Yo, 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 what's going on, fam? It's your boy back with another video. Yeah, right back at you, man. I had to, I had to get this video out as well, with the other one, so like I said, while I was home, I figured I'd take the time to do that. Man, so first and foremost, I just want to give all thanks and praise as usual to the Most High. You know how I go, for the opportunity to come and reason and build and commune with the tribe once again. And, yeah, man, so we want to give all thanks and praise for that, always, So with this video, man, I'm coming with what I feel is a very important video, man, getting into some information about the duty of man, what is the duty of man, and how does that correlate to how we've been moving, you know what I'm saying, and what we got to do, as a tribe, and things like that. And so, in my last video I just dropped on you, you know what I'm saying, we was digging on them Levites in the South, right, in Cherokee, right, keeping the ancient sacred way, right, connected to the Essenes, right. So, we was talking about raising this priesthood, you know what I'm saying, and we know one thing that priests do, the Levites, they provide refuge, right? The Cherokee had cities of refuge and things of that nature. And so we know that this priesthood must do the same for its tribe, right? Join them back to the Creator and provide a sense of refuge. So, and I think with this video, the Most High kind of just showed me the step further into what that really means and how it could, really be obtained, you know what I'm saying, and manifested, if you will. Now, one thing I do want to say, man, is I want to one time I remember catching the bro Arthur Scott, and he said something very interesting. He said presentation is not advocation, right? I think that's what he said. So you said presentation is not avocation, and I think that's something that, we need to understand when we catching, the drop by these YouTube authors, you know what I'm saying, that just because they present something don't mean that they advocate it, right? Don't mean that they telling you to go out there and do this is what you need to do. Just take the drop, filter it, and pray fast about it. Ask the Spirit of the Most High to lead you into what to do, you know what I'm saying, as far as that goes. But, I just wanted to state that before I get into this video, so when you see some of the things, you just don't get ignorant, you know what I'm saying. So I ask y'all to bear with me, man. This is a very pertinent info, man, and I want you to pay attention. I want you to get the drop. We're gonna, like I say, we're gonna be digging on the duty of man in this relation to, our movement and our exodus, you know what I'm saying? So let's get it. Alright, so, now first starting off, man, what led me to this particular video and this abode of information right here was, I was thinking one day, you know what I'm saying, I'm like, okay, thinking about the priesthood, right, being risen, these Levites providing refuge, right, separation, purification, that's what it's always been about, right? Excuse me. So I'm thinking like, okay, now, if the Levitical cities that the Levites were dwelling in, some of them were cities of refuge, right, and we must reenact that, right, we must, raise the priesthood so that it can provide refuge for the tribe, things of that nature. You know how it go. We've been building on it. So I was thinking of, did the Bible kind of mention anything about the reestablishment, particularly of a Levitical city, you know what I'm saying, or something of the sort, this type of city of refuge, you know what I'm saying, and things of that nature. So, so when I was thinking of that question, you know what I'm saying, the verses from Isaiah 61 kind of popped in my head, particularly Isaiah 61 verse 4, right? But but to understand this chapter, we're talking about the year of the Lord's favor, right? We're talking about the proclamation of the Jubilee, you know what I'm saying? When Isaiah was telling people, you know what I'm saying, to correct their status, to proclaim liberty, to proclaim sovereignty, independence, right? To proclaim the Jubilee. Now, one thing we know, the Jubilee is dealing with two things, right? It's dealing with the restoration of land, right? And the freeing of slaves, right? So right here he say to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord, which is the Jubilee, and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all that mourn, right? So in verse 4 it say, and they shall build the old wastes, right? And they shall raise up the former desolations, and they shall repair the waste cities, the desolation of many generations. Okay, so I'm like, okay, I'm thinking of it, I'm like, okay, what is this exactly talking about, right? I'm looking to see if the Bible is talking about a reestablishment of a Levitical city, a city of refuge, you know what I'm saying? So I was looking into the Strongs, you know what I'm saying? I was looking into the Strongs, right? And so I'm like, okay, they shall rebuild the old wastes, right? What is a waste, right? They shall raise up the former desolations, right? They shall repair the waste cities, right? That's what I'm thinking about, right? We're talking about Levitical cities. So I'm like, okay, does this have anything to do with what I'm looking for? So I go to the Strong's for this word right here, waste. And the word for it is Horeb, right? Choreb, or the Horeb, right? Drought, desolation, you know what I'm saying? Drought, dry, heat, right? Waste. But something kind of popped in my head because I'm like, Horeb, I'm like, that's the mountain that Moses went up to, right? You know what I'm saying? So that's very interesting for one reason, you know what I'm saying? Especially dealing with the Levites, because the priesthood was established at Horeb, right? So the verse is saying like they gonna repair the waste cities, right? The Horeb cities. And I'm thinking like, okay, could this be a reestablishment? Because Horeb is the place where the priesthood was initially given to Levi. Let's dig on it. All right, so we over here at the wiki page, right? Mount Horeb. All right, so check this out. Say Mount Horeb, right? Horeb, like Horeb, right? So Horeb is the mountain at which the book of Deuteronomy in the Bible states that the 10 commandments were given to Moses by God. All right, so check that out, right? We know that place is Mount Sinai, right? But check it out. It say it is described in two places, Exodus 3, 1 Kings 19. All right, the mountain of God. All right, so Horeb is also called the mountain of God. All right, the mountain is also called the mountain of the Most High, right? In other biblical passages, these events are described as having transpired at Mount Sinai. Although Sinai and Horeb are often considered to have been different names for the same place, there is a body of opinion, right? Opinion that they may have been different locations, right? All right. The Protestant reformer John Calvin took the view that Sinai and Horeb were the same mountain, right? With the eastern side of the mountain being called Sinai and the western side being called Horeb. All right. Suggested that there's one mountain, only it had two tops, which bore these different names. All right. So etymology, right? Horeb is thought to mean glowing heat, which seems to be a reference to the sun, while, right, burning hot, glowing, you know what I'm saying, drought, dry, you know. While Sinai may have derived from the name Sin, right, Sumerian deity of the moon, and thus Sinai and Horeb would be the mountains of the moon and sun, respectively, okay? So, this is just a Wikipedia page. This is just general, do some deeper digging on Horeb if you want. I'm just getting this just for the general knowledge, right? The name Horeb first occurs at Exodus 3:1 with the story of Moses in the burning bush, right? So the name first occurs when we're dealing with this burning bush, right? Now, is that not what we were just talking about in the last video? And I know these videos are gonna be back to back. So if you haven't seen the last video I just dropped, I ask you to go get that before you catch this one. You feel what I'm saying? So do that for you, boy. So the name Horeb was first occurs in Exodus 3:1 with the story of Moses in the burning bush. Alright, so that's very important and relevant right there. Alright, so Exodus 3:5, the ground of the mountain was considered holy, and Moses was commanded by God to remove his shoes. We talking about holy ground right here, right? Alright, so Exodus 17:6 described the incident when the Israelites were in the wilderness without water. Moses was upon the rock at Horeb, struck the rock, and obtained drinking water from the rock. Goes on to say that Moses called the name of that place Massah and Meribah because of the contention of the children of Israel, and because they tempted the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" Right? So this place of Horeb, right, where he struck this rock, he also called the name of this place Massah and Meribah. That's very important. We're going to get into it in a little bit. Alright, so, just some other little incidents where you have Horeb, right? Horeb is mentioned several times in the account of wanderings of the Israelite in the wilderness. Pay attention to this word, we're going to be dealing with it a lot. It's all about the wilderness, right? Moses recalled in Deuteronomy that God said to the Israelites at Horeb, "You have dwelt long enough at this mountain, turn and take your journey," confirming the same suggestion that Horeb was the location which they set off towards Canaan. Now that's very important, right? Because we're dealing with a receiving of a law at this place, and then them going and taking their journey into the promised land, right? So, alright, so we got some more stuff, right? Horeb, the Ark of the Covenant contains the tablets delivered to Moses at Horeb. 1 King 19:8, Elijah visits Horeb, the Mount of God, right? Elijah, right, is very important because we know he is the purifier of the priesthood. You feel what I'm saying? So he visits Horeb, the mountain of God, right? Alright, so so let's go into the scriptures real quick. Okay, so digging on this place Horeb, we see that Moses called this place, right, where he was upon the rock of Horeb, he called that place Massah and Meribah. So, like I say now, this is the place where the priesthood was established, right? So, when you look at it, so let's get into that. We're gonna go to Deuteronomy 33 real quick and get the blessings of the tribes, right? Particularly dealing with Levi right now. He said, "And of Levi," he said, "Let thy Thummim and thy Urim be with thy Holy One, who thou did prove at Massah," right? "And with whom thou didst strive at the waters of Meribah," right? So the Most High is saying, let the Thummim and the Urim be with the Holy One, who did prove at Massah and at Meribah, right? Which is the Horeb, right? The Horeb that Moses received the law and gave the Israelites water to drink. All right, in the drought, right? So, right, who said unto his father and to his mother, I have not seen him, neither did he acknowledge his brother, nor knew his own children, for they observed, right, kept thy word and kept thy covenant, right? They shall teach Jacob thy judgments, and Israel thy law. They shall put incense before thee, and hold burnt offerings upon thy sacrifice, right? So understand right here, you know what I'm saying? Levi was given the priesthood, right? And he proved himself when he stood for the Most High at Massah and Meribah, which is Horeb. So let's get that. Let's go over here real quick to Genesis 32, right? The golden calf, right? So the golden calf, right? And when when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down out of the mount, they gathered themselves together unto Aaron and said unto him, Make us gods, which shall go before us. For as this Moses, the man that brought us up out the land of Egypt, we wot not what become of him. And Aaron said unto them, Break off golden earrings, which are in the ears of your wives and your sons and your daughters, and bring them unto me. And take and all the people break off the golden earrings which were in their ears, and brought them unto Aaron. And he received them at their hand, and fashioned it with the graven tool, after he had made it a molten calf. And they said, These be thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out the land of Israel, right? And when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it, and Aaron made proclamation, saying, Tomorrow is a feast of the Lord. And the people rose up early on the morning and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings. And the people sat down to eat and drink, and rose up to play. And the Lord said unto Moses, Go, get thee down, for thy people which thou broughtest out of the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves. They have turned aside quickly out of the way, right? Out of the way, which I commanded them. They have made them a molten calf, and have worshipped it, and sacrificed unto it, and said, These be thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out the land of Egypt, right? So he say, let me see. And the Lord said unto Moses, I have seen these people, and behold, it is a stiff-necked people, right? Now therefore let me alone, that my wrath may wax hot against them, and that I may consume them, and I will make of thee a great nation. And Moses brought up, besought the Lord that God, and said, Lord, why dost thou wax hot against thy people, which thou hast brought forth with the land of Egypt with great power and a mighty hand? Wherefore should the Egyptians speak for the and say, for the mischief he did bring them out to slay them in the mountains and consume them from the face of the earth? Turn from thy fierce wrath and repent of this evil against thy people. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, thy servants, to whom thou swearest by thine own self, and said unto them, I will multiply your seed as the stars of heaven, and all this land that I spoken of I will give unto your seed, and and they shall inherit it forever. Alright, so and the Lord repented of the evil which he thought to do unto his people, right? So Moses went down to go into the mount, right? And it says, I'm gonna skip down a little bit. And it came to pass, as soon as he came nigh unto the camp, that he saw the calf and the dancing, and Moses' anger waxed hot, and he cast the tables out of his hand and brake them beneath the mount. And he took the calf which he had made, which they had made, and burnt it in the fire, right? Grounded it to powder, and strawed it upon the water, and made the children of Israel to drink of it. Alright. And Moses said unto Aaron, What did this people unto thee, that thou hast brought so great a sin upon them? And so Aaron told them, you know what I'm saying, what they asked him to do. I'm gonna skip down just a little bit, right? And so he said, and when Moses saw that the people were naked, for Aaron had made them naked unto their shame amongst their enemies, then Moses stood in the gate of the camp and said, Who is on the Lord's side, right? Let him come unto me. And all the sons of Levi gathered themselves together unto him. And he said unto them, Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, Put every man his sword by his side, and go in and out from gate to gate throughout the camp, and slay every man of his brother, and every man his companion, and every man his neighbor. And the children of Levi did according to the word of Moses, and there fell of the people that day about 3,000. So this one tribe, this one priestly tribe that remained zealous unto the Most High, went and slaughtered 3,000 men of the rest of the tribe, all the rest of the 11. You feel me? So he say, For Moses has said, consecrate yourselves, right? Sanctify and separate yourselves, right? Make yourselves holy today to the Lord, right? Consecrate yourselves today to the Lord, even every man upon his son, upon his brother, that they may be bestowed upon you a blessing this day. And it came, right? And it came to pass on the morrow that Moses said to the people, Ye have sinned great, and now I will go up to the mountain, go up to the Lord, peradventure I shall make an atonement for your sins. Okay, so you see right here, right? When the Levites remained zealous with the Most High, at Sinai or Horeb, right, Massa and Meribah, Moses told them to consecrate themselves that day to the Lord, right? That every man, his son, his brother, his lineage, that they may bestow a blessing upon you this day, right? So he received the true priesthood, right? That day for remaining zealous unto the Most High. So, you know, that had me thinking, right? I'm like, okay, so this Horeb, let's go. Let's see some. All right, so back here Isaiah 61, right, where it said they shall rebuild the waste cities, right, or the Horeb cities. So like I say now, Horeb is the place where Moses received the law, right? And he received the proclamation of deliverance from the burning bush. And it's the place, or the fiery bush, shall I say. And it's the place where the priesthood was first enacted, right? It was first kind of created, right? When the Levites remained zealous for the Lord at this Horeb, right? So, that got me thinking, you know what I'm saying? But right, repairing the waste cities or the Horeb cities, this place where the priesthood was first enacted, right? Repairing that, you know what I'm saying? It got me thinking, but so I went to do some more digging within the scriptures about these Levitical cities to see what else I can find, and so I came upon something interesting. Let's get into it. All right, so come over here to Leviticus chapter 25, right? And so we talking about the year of the Jubilee, right? And Jubilee is dealing with the blowing of the trumpet and like I say, the restoration of property and the emission of slaves and the emancipation of slaves, right? So, right, so go down. We talking about redemption of property. All right, so now pay attention to what the Most High is saying right here, right? He say, and the land shall not be sold for a permanence. All right, let's get the King James real fast. All right, the land shall not be sold forever, right? For the land is mine, for ye are strangers and sojourners with me. So understand that. So the Most High's land is to not be sold forever, right? For the land is mine, right? For ye are strangers and sojourners with me. And in all the land of your possession ye shall grant a redemption for the land, right? If thy brother be waxing poor. Now this is what we're dealing with law, and understand that our government, right, stems from ecclesiastical law. A lot of its laws come from this very Bible, right? You get into land laws and things like that. So, if thy brother be waxing poor and have sold away some of his possession, and if any of his kin come to redeem it, then shall he redeem that which his brother sold. And if the man that have none to redeem it, and himself be able to redeem it, then let him count the years of the sale thereof, and restore the overplus unto the man whom he sold it, alright, that he may return unto his possession, right? Now it's very interesting because my brother Jay Stu got he got this Stone Edition Bible, right, and was reading the verse in there. And this verse where it says possession, it says ancestral heritage, right? So right here it says that he may return into his ancestral heritage. So I felt like that was very interesting, right? And if he be not able to restore it to him, then that which is sold shall remain in the hand of him that bought it until the year of the Jubilee. And in the Jubilee it shall go out, and he shall return unto his possession, or his ancestral heritage, right? So, and if a man sell a house in a walled city, then he may redeem it within a whole year. After it is sold, within a full year may he redeem it. And if it be not redeemed within the space of a full year, then the house that is in the walled city shall be established forever to him that bought it throughout his generations. It shall not go out in the Jubilee. But the houses of the villages which have no wall round about them shall be counted as the fields of the country that may be redeemed, and shall go out in the Jubilee. All right, now check this out, right? Because this is where, it gets, really relevant to what we're talking about. It says, notwithstanding the cities of the Levites and the houses of the cities of their possession, may the Levites redeem at any time. All right, now check that out. May the Levites redeem at any time. Okay, now, also in that Stone Edition Bible of J. Stu's, this verse right here said, it said, in the houses of the cities of their ancestral possession, the Levites have a eternal right of redemption, right? Or something like that. It said, the Levites have an eternal right, of redemption, or something like that. Man, it was very interesting the way they worded, right? right? So it says here that they may redeem it at any time, right? So, and if a man purchase of the Levites, then the house that was sold and the city of his possession or his ancestral heritage shall go out in the year of the Jubilee, for the houses of the cities of the Levites are their possession among the children of Israel, right? That's really all they got. You feel what I'm saying? So, so then it says, but the field of the suburbs of their cities may not be sold, for it is their perpetual possession. Now, this is very key. Understand this, right? So they're saying that the cities of the Levites, right, and the houses in the cities, may the Levites redeem at any time. And if a man purchase the house that is in the cities of the Levites, it shall go out in the year of the Jubilee, right? And the Levite may be able to repossess it, because that house is their possession among the children, is all they got, and you can't completely, you know what I'm saying, disown him from that, because that was all he was given by the Most High, right? The children of Levi weren't given land allotments, right? The Most High say that I'm your inheritance. I'm gonna scatter you throughout Israel. I'm gonna give you these suburbs in the territories of the tribes, right? So now understand that. Now it say the field of the suburbs of the city may not be sold, for it is their perpetual possession. Alright. So now one thing, you know what I'm saying, that I was thinking about. Alright, so you know, I was thinking like redeem, right? The houses in this of the cities of their ancestral heritage, may they redeem at any time. And I'm thinking like you know, redeem. I know redeem means to buy back, right? But I know Levites don't buy land, right? The Most High didn't give them land to buy. They didn't have to buy land. They were allotted land, right? And so, you know, that made me think. Alright, so, and remember last video we was reading out the James Adair History of the Indians, of the American Indians book, right? This is James Adair History on the American Indians. And so I remember I read the top part of this right here, but it was something in here that made me think that was kind of interesting, right? And so he say let me see. Okay, I'm gonna start here. This is some of the stuff I read the first time, right? Alright, so it says, besides, as Messiah has come according to the predictions of the divine oracles which represented him under various strong types and shadows, surely Christians ought to follow the copy of their humble master and holy disciples, and leave the fleecing of the flock to the avaricious Jews, whose religious tenets and rapacious principles support them in taking annual tithes from each other, who affect to believe that all the Mosaic law is perpetually binding, right? And that the predicted Shiloh, who is to be their purifier, right? King, prophet, and high priest, is not yet come. Alright, now check this out. The law of tithing was calculated only for the religious ceremony of the Hebrew nation, for as the merciful deity, who was the immediate head of state, right? Talking about a theocracy, had appropriated the Levites to his service and prohibited them from purchasing land, lest they should be seduced from their religious duty by worldly cares. He, by a most bountiful law, right, by a most bountiful law, ordered the state to give them the tithe and offerings for the support of themselves, their numerous families, and also of the widow, the fatherless, and the stranger. Alright, so you know what I'm saying? That kind of hit me like, dang. He said the Most High prohibited them from purchasing land, right? But instead what he did was, by a bountiful law, right? By a certain bountiful statute, he ordered the state to give them, right, what they needed, right? Those Levitical cities, right? So you know, so that was very interesting. Okay, so like I said, that had me thinking like, I'm wondering if Levites really even buy land. You know what I'm saying? Now, understand, this is not telling nobody not to go purchase no land. You know what I'm saying? Buy, you know, if you need to purchase land, man, buy it, get it, lock it down. You know, get the title, get the deed. This is not about that. This is something deeper. You feel what I'm saying? So understand, don't associate this with your intermediate endeavors or whatever you got going on. You know what I'm saying? just understand where I'm coming from with this. So, you know, I went and I looked at the word that they had in the scripture, right, for redeem, because like I said, I know redeem kind of means to buy, right, to buy back. I'm like, you know, I'm thinking they don't really buy land, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not something they really did, you know. They was given these cities with these suburbs, with these fields around. We're gonna get into that in just a second, right? So right here it's a redeem, right, which was 1353, right? This Goella, almost like Gullah, like Yella, right? So go to it. 1353, right? The Gullah, right? So almost like the Gullah, crazy. But anyway, so you see where it's used, right? Redeem 5 times, redemption 5 times, again 1 time, kindred 1 time, redeem with 4672. Okay, right. All right. So kindred, redemption, right? Right of redemption, price of redemption. All right. So that's okay. We're dealing with the redemption, right? Including the right, okay, and the object. Okay, kindred, redeem, redemption, right. All right. Redemption of a field and farm. Okay, bam. Now check that out, because that's gonna play a very key role into what we're talking about, right? So the word was mean like the redemption of a field or farm. All right, so that's that right there is very interesting. Okay, hold on 1 second, y'all. Let's figure out what's going on here. Okay, so came over here to the etymology of redeem, right? And so as you can see, the first thing you get is buy back, right? Ransom. Also in a theological sense, deliver from sin and spiritual death. All right. Okay, but Old French redeemer, right? Buy back. From Latin, redeemer, right? To redeem, buy back. From red, back, see re, and emer, to take, buy, gain, procure. So now that right there kind of hit me, right? From root M, to take, right? Distribute. Now y'all be like, okay, now that right there makes a little bit more sense to me, right? Concerning these Levites, to take or either to gain, and to gain for a reason we'll discuss later. All right, so you know, just going back to the scriptures, right? That on the verse, right? You know, the Levites may redeem the land at any time, or the houses of the cities of their possession at any time. Kind of, you know, that understanding kind of helped me see exactly what it was talking about, because they wouldn't buy it back because they didn't pay for it in the first place, right? All right, so now 25 and 34 is kind of interesting as well, because you see, but the field of the suburbs of the cities may not be sold, for it is their perpetual possession. So now the fields of the suburbs, we know from our good bro Natural by Law breaking it down to us, right? We know that this was dealing with the green belts. Okay? We know this was dealing with the green belts, right? So let's dig on that just a little bit. All right, so green belt, right? All right, so well, one thing first, when the bro Natural by Law was breaking out these green belts, showing you these green belts, it was in his Levitical city video, which he also titled The Garden of the Indians. So it was very interesting, man. I feel very divine, you know, that the Most High had the brother do it that way, because it's very when you understand what we're gonna be getting into today, man, it's very relative, you know what I'm saying, and it's very fitting, you know. So like I say, now he was breaking it out in the Levitical city video, and there was a reason for that. So he said a green belt or a green belt is a policy and land use designation used in land use planning to retain areas of largely undeveloped, wild, or agricultural land, right? So now understand this, because we're going to get into this a little bit later, but understand right now that this is saying wild and or agricultural land. You see what I'm saying? So when we break down those definitions a little bit later, you're going to be able to put that into perspective. You know what I'm saying? That these green belts are dealing with wild and or agricultural land. You feel what I'm saying? So, or neighboring urban areas. You see what I'm saying? So similar concept are green belts or green wedges, which have a linear character and may run through an urban area instead of around it. In essence, a green belt is an invisible line designating a border around a certain area, preventing development of the area, allowing wildlife to return and be established. All right. So some of the purposes, right? Protect natural, semi-natural environments, improve air quality with urban areas. You feel protect the unique character of rural communities that might otherwise be absorbed by expanding suburbs, right? Remember Levitical suburbs. You know what I'm saying? Walking, camping. You know what I'm saying? A contiguous, I guess, habitat network for wild plants, animals, and wildlife, right? Cleaner air and water, better land use of areas within bordering cities. You feel what I'm saying? So understand that. Now let's go to the history. The Old Testament outlines a proposal for a green belt around the Levite towns in the land of Israel, right? So Moses expounded that the green belt plan from the Old Testament referred to all towns in ancient Israel. All right, so understand that this green belt, it says the Old Testament outlines a proposal for a green belt around the Levitical cities, right? So when you understand the way the cities of the Levites was orchestrated, right? Moses commanded that around the cities would be land used for the farming, the fields, right? And the forests around that, right? For the fruits, their harvest and their animals and plants and things like that. But there was a green belt around the Levitical cities, right? Which is why you see in this verse right here, it said, but the field of the suburbs, right? The fields around the Levitical cities, the suburbs of the cities may not be sold, for it is their perpetual possession, right? So this land around these Levitical cities may not be sold, right? Because it's the Levites' perpetual possession, right? So, that right there got me thinking, because I'm like, okay, we're dealing with green belts, right? And these were surrounding Levitical cities, and bro Natural been bringing out the Levitical cities amongst the Cherokee and the South, the cities of refuge, right? And we know that this is a lot of that land. It's like greenbelt land, right? Because when you look at this greenbelt land, we're dealing with farmland, agricultural land, right? So I'm like, okay, so if the Levitical cities, the fields around them, the greenbelts were not to be sold, I'm like, how did the invader, get them? Like, what was the process? Like, you know what I'm saying? Well, how did that happen? You feel what I'm saying? Especially if they set themselves up in an ecclesiastical way. But I'm like, man, what did they do? Because they just come and set up on these lands and start farming these people land. Start farming the farmland. You know what I'm saying? Because that's essentially what would have had to happen. But, when I said farm, that got me thinking too. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so then I came to the etymology, right? And I typed in farm. You feel what I'm saying? And it was very interesting what I got. You know what I'm saying? I got fixed payment, right? Fixed rent. Familiar to fix, right? Fixed payment. A rent, lease. You feel what I'm saying? Constant, trusty, right? Now that was interesting, right? Check this out. Sense of a tract of leased land, right? That of cultivated land, leased or not. All right. So, you know what I'm saying? So, jump down to the verb, right? To farm is to rent land. You feel what I'm saying? A rent, a lease, right? So, I'm like, okay, dang. So we're dealing with green belts, that is agricultural land, right? That was not to be sold. All right, it was farmland. And when we see when they farm, it was a fixed payment. It was to rent land, right? To a rent, a lease, right? A lease. Go into the etymology of lease. I'm like, okay, lease, okay, legal contract. Legal contract. I can't even speak. Legal contract conveying property, usually for a fixed period of time with a fixed compensation. All right, Liz, right? A lease. Okay. So much love, brethren. A lease, a letting, a leaving. Okay. Oh, let's hear to let, allow, permit. I say, okay, I understand what's going on here, right? Lease, verb, right? When you lease something, to take a lease, right? It's from the old French word, liaisier, however you say it, to let, or to let go, to let out. All right, leave, all right? But to let, allow, permit. Now, that's what hit me. Because lease come from, the root of lease means to let, right? To allow, right? And when you're dealing with a lease, you're dealing with a contract conveying some type of property for a fixed period of time, right? With the fixed compensation. Okay, so to farm is to rent and to lease land. So I'm like, okay, I understand exactly what's going on here, right? These fields, these farms, right, were not to be sold because they were the Levitical family's perpetual possession. So the Most High say, when the invaders came in, he say, well, you can't buy the land because it's mine. You can farm it, right? Dress it and keep it. That's the payment, right? To farm, that's the fixed payment. That's to rent. Long as you dress and keep my land, you can occupy it because it's not yours. So your payment for the land is keeping it, right? You're keeping it for a certain amount of time because it's not yours, because there's going to come a time when the inheritors of that land is going to repossess it because it's their perpetual possession. You feel what I'm saying? And so I'm like, okay, now things are starting to register, right? So I'm seeing, I'm like, okay, so these fields, right, this land of the Most High was not necessarily to be sold, right? The only way you could possess it is if you dressed and kept it, right? If you farmed it, that was the payment, that was the fixed payment, right? You feel what I'm saying? Because it's even like when you understand keep, right? Like we say, to dress, to keep, right? To keep God's laws is a payment, right? Because you made a contract with the Most High, right? He said, I have land, right? Beautiful land, right? I have chosen you and I'm going to give it to you, right? The only thing you have to pay me is for occupying my promised land, my paradise. You feel what I'm saying? This land of milk and honey. The only payment you have to give me is keeping my laws, keeping my divine ordinances, right? Which is why you'll understand why we were sent into slavery, because if we broke God's law, that means we were what? We were occupying land and rights, right? We were occupying an inheritance. And you know what I'm saying? For all these months and years without keeping his law. So you occupying land and haven't paid rent for Lord knows how long, right? So you in debt. You feel what I'm saying? You in debt. Now you got to go and work in free labor, in bondage, right? Because you owe. You feel what I'm saying? So now you got to go and dress and keep the land for free because you owe, right? So I'm like, okay, so the payment is to dress and keep. That's the payment for, and it made me think the duty of man. It's like, okay, it goes back to the duty of man. What is the duty of man? Why was man created? What was his purpose? What was his true intention, right? And we can see that when we go to Genesis, when God formed man, right? So let's go get it. All right, so excuse me. So when when we understand that, like, that's a big question in society. So I don't want to tackle it too lightly, but really though, when a lot of people want to know what's the purpose of man, what's man's duty, and and things like that. But I find a very interesting perspective of that in Genesis, because in Genesis what you see is man is a product of a solution that the Most High created to a problem. You feel what I'm saying? There was a problem, right? And the Most High created a solution for that problem. And that problem, that solution was man. You feel what I'm saying? Not as in its entirety, in the entire sense of the purpose of man's creation, but in the very broad aspect of it. Because you can look right here in Genesis 5, right? And let's get it. He say, in every plant of the field, right, before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew, for the Lord God had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was not a man to till the ground. So understand. The Most High, he say, before the plants, before there was any vegetation in the earth, the Most High didn't cause it to rain, right? He didn't want the rain to fall upon the earth to cause the vegetation to grow, because there was no man to dress it and keep it. There was no man to cultivate the earth if he would have did so. You feel what I'm saying? So, like I say, the Most High seen a problem, right? And he created the solution, right? Man, right? He seen that there was not a man to till the ground. But there went up a mist from the earth, right? This is dealing with dew. Remember in the last video we was talking about dew, right? The distillation process. Dew, things of that nature, right? The mist that went up from the earth, from the ground, we know that's dealing with dew. And it watered the whole face of the ground, right? And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, and he breathed into his breath, his nostrils, the breath of life, and man became a living soul. And the Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he formed. Right? So understand that. The Most High, before the Most High grew vegetation, he withheld the rain, because he was like, man, there's if I cause it to rain upon the earth, there's no one to dress it and keep it, right? There's no one to cultivate it, right? So he's like, okay, well, I'm gonna create man. So what he did was he called the dew to water the ground, and he formed man from the dust of the ground. Then he planted the garden, and then placed the man whom he formed in the garden, right? Understand the sequence of events, right? Okay, jumping down to verse 15, right? And the Lord God took the man and put him into the garden of Eden to dress it and keep it. So understand that right there. That is the duty of man. That is the purpose of man. To dress and keep the planet, right? Eden, the whole planet, was a garden, right? When you farm, what are you farming? You're farming a garden. You feel what I'm saying? So understand why the Most High chose to place Adam in a garden. Adam's job was to dress it and keep it, was to keep the earth a garden, a heavenly paradise, right? The Most High gave Adam the earth. It was his dominion, right? He said he created Adam in his image. You feel what I'm saying? Man's job is to create, is to make the earth and raise it to a heavenly state, to be a God on it, to be in the image of the Creator, to raise it into a heaven, to keep it as a paradise. You feel what I'm saying? God placed Adam in a garden because that's an organic environment. You feel what I'm saying? When scientists want to study the mind of the Creator, they study his creation, right? Which is why you understand organic, right? Organic literally means the study of carbon, because anywhere carbon is, they know the Creator has been working, because that's like the element of life. Anything living, anything organic is full of carbon. You feel what I'm saying? So they know where they see carbon, they know that the presence of the Creator was there. You feel what I'm saying? It's an organic environment. So where would you learn about the Creator more than being in an organic environment, right? A carbonated environment. So the Most High placed Adam in the garden to teach him about himself, right? The angels of the earth mother were her ministering elements, right? The animals, the plants, they would teach you how to to live, and they would teach you the aspects and the characteristics of the Creator, right? The Creator was showing you himself. He was teaching you how to be himself, right? Which is when you look at it, he placed Adam in the garden to dress it and keep it, right? The whole duty of man is that Adam is a farmer. He's a gardener, right? He lives in an organic environment, right? He plants seeds, right? As the seeds grow, he dress them and keep them. He look after them, right? When weeds come around and grow around them, you would move those weeds, protect and defend, guard, keep, right? You would guard the plant, right? Make sure it has enough water, everything it needs so that it can grow and bear fruit, right? The Creator was literally putting you in his place, right? Because we see right here, right? Back up in verse 5, that the Most High had not caused it to rain upon the earth because there was no man to till the ground. But then there went a mist from the earth and watered the ground, right? And then the Lord God formed the man from the ground. So you see, once the ground got watered, then God forms man from the ground, almost as if he planted him as a seed. And when the ground got watered, man formed and grew as a plant, and the Most High nourished that plant and protected it and provided for it and kept it. You feel what I'm saying? And he gave you that same duty on this planet, on this earth, in this paradise. Your job was to dress it and keep it and grow and understand how to treat life and be a God. You feel what I'm saying? And things of that nature, right? Which is why Adam was given dominion. He was given dominion over everything of the planet, because he was the protector, he was the provider, he was the dresser and the keeper. He was a planet keeper, right? You were supposed to keep the planet. The original man, you were supposed to keep the planet. But look how you've let your wickedness has allowed these parasites to come into the garden and infest it and suck it dry. You know what I'm saying? And so that's a very big part of the understanding. So understand that man's job was to dress and keep the land. And that is a payment in itself to the Creator for being on his land. You got to dress it, you got to keep it, you got to take care of it, right? And since Adam didn't obey the voice of the Most High, he got kicked out the garden, and the cherubim had to keep it. You feel what I'm saying? So now Adam is no longer dressing and keeping it. The cherubim is keeping it. But let's get into that, because that provides us with a very interesting perspective on the land. Alright, so coming over to Genesis chapter 3, verse 17. You know what I'm saying? We check out what it says. And unto Adam he said, because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree of which I commanded thee, saying, thou shalt not eat of it. Cursed is the ground for thy sake. In sorrow shalt thou eat of it all thy days. Alright, so now the ground is being cursed for thy sake, right? He say, thorns and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, right? And thou shalt eat of the herb of the field. You see what I'm saying? Alright, now check this out. In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, till thou return unto the ground. For out of it was thou taken, for dust thou art, and unto dust thou shalt return. And Adam called his wife's name Eve, because she was the mother of all living, right? And unto Adam also did he take his wife, and to his wife did the Lord God make coats of skin and clothe them. Alright, and the Lord God said, behold, the man is become as one of us to know good and evil. And now lest he put forth his hand, and take also of the tree of life, and eat and live forever. Alright, now check this out. He said, therefore the Lord God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden, right, to till the ground from whence he was taken. Alright, so now understand that, right? The Most High hadn't already planted the garden. All Adam had to do was dress it and keep it. But since he sinned, that caused the curse to be put upon the ground, now he get booted out the garden, and now he actually got to till the soil. So he got to work the dirt and overturn it and literally create the terraces and the and the beds for the garden to be, right? First, he didn't have to do that, right? It was already a garden planted. He just had to dress it, keep it, make sure make sure the weeds ain't come, make sure everything had the proper space, look after the plants, make sure they was all right to grow. You know what I'm saying? But now he actually has to create a garden. You feel what I'm saying? Due to his sin. Now understand something, right? So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubims and a flaming sword which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life. Alright, so now understand something, right? Now he drove out the man, and he placed cherubims with this flaming sword. I remember 2 videos ago we was talking about that flaming sword now, and I asked that you refresh your memory on that video, because it's kind of gonna play into this one as well, right? So when we were dealing with the flaming sword, we were talking about the fires. You know what I'm saying? And how the fires that go through the land. You know what I'm saying? And we were kind of relating that to the cherubim and the flaming sword. But now understand something, right? Now understand this very interesting pattern, right, in the Hebrew language concerning this, right? Because we see that the Most High drove out the man out of the garden, and he placed the cherubim, right? Now the Hebrew word, the strong right there, is cherub, right? Cherub, 3742, right? So the Most High kicked out Adam of the garden, right? And he placed a cherubim, right? Or a cherub, right? A cherub, alright? And a flaming sword, right? Now the Strongs for that is 2719, which is a cherub, right? A cherub, right? Means drought. Also cutting instrument, right? So this is a destroying weapon. This is a weapon that makes drought, right? You feel what I'm saying? Alright, so this is a weapon of destruction. You feel what I'm saying? So understand that when it's saying that sword, it's talking about a destructive effect, right? A destructive instrument, destructive weapon, right? Drought from 2717, meaning drought. You feel what I'm saying? Now understand that. So the Most High kicked out Adam, and he placed a cherub with a cherub, right? Drought. Now understand, alright, as when we see the word right here for sword, right? The cherub, the herub, is 2719, right? This word herub, it means drought. Remember what also was talking about a drought? Horeb, which is very similar to this word. And remember, we talking about 2719. Let's go back to Isaiah chapter 61. Alright. Remember, we was talking about they shall build the old wastes, right? The waste, right? Remember, we got it from right here, right? We were just looking at, what was it, 2719? This is 2721, right? And it was Horeb, right? So now understand that, right? We're talking about desolation, right? The old wastes, right? Former desolations, right? Horeb, right? So the Most High say, he kicked out Adam, and he placed the cherub or a cherub with a cherub that made the land Horeb or Herub, right? Even if you go to Ezekiel 36, we're going to touch on this a little bit later. I just want to get the word, right? Ezekiel 36, verse 35. Let's see if we can get it. Right? You got, right here, you got 2720, right? We were just on 2721. And before we was at 2719. Now you got 2720. And this is what? Cherub. You feel what I'm saying? The waste, the desolate. You know what I'm saying? The desolate cities, right? The ruined cities. The same thing as 61. The word for right there is cherub, right? 2720. Cherub. Right? Cherub or charub, right? Okay. Charub meaning right from 2717. Parched, ruined, desolate, dry, waste. Alright. So understand that right there, man. I don't think that pattern is that way for a reason, right? The Most High places a cherub at the east gate. He places a cherub, right, with a cherub to make the land cherub and Horeb, right, meaning drought, dry, right? So now the garden, right, the land of the garden is really turned into a desert, a dry place, a drought, or You feel what I'm saying? Or something of that nature, right? The way to play on Hebrew words is very interesting, okay? Like I say, Horeb, right? The cherub or the cherub is placed with the cherub, the sword that makes the land Horeb or Horeb, right? Dry, desolate, things of that nature. Alright, so, I'm like, dang, that's crazy. I don't really think that's a coincidence that the play on the word with the Hebrew language is that similar. It stemmed from the same roots. The Strongs are very similar. They're right after one another. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, that's crazy. You know what I'm saying? It's like, so that the land now, but remember from the beginning, we was digging on Isaiah 61, and it was talking about that the remnant, you know what I'm saying? Those who proclaim liberty and are called trees of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, and have proclaimed the year of the Jubilee, which is what the restoration of lands, right? It's talking about they shall build the old wastes and raise up the former desolations, and they shall repair the waste cities, right? So they shall repair the Horeb cities or the dry and the drought places. So I'm like, okay, they repairing this drought or these drought places. I'm like, okay, what's, you know what I'm saying? So like, what's up with that? You know what I'm saying? Like, what does that really mean? Like the waste, right? They're going to repair the waste places in the desolations, right? The former desolations and stuff like that. So, I went and did some etymology digging, right? All right. So when you understand, waste, a waste is 1300 of land. Waste describing land, right? Adjective. So the description of waste pertaining to land means desolate, uncultivated. I'm like, okay. You know what I'm saying? Waste, right? Empty, desolate. You know what I'm saying? To leave, right? Abandon, give out, right? Waste, noun, desolate regions. Waste, damage, destruction, wasteland, more, right? Empty, desolate. You feel what I'm saying? To leave, abandon, give out. You feel what I'm saying? A desert, a wilderness, right? So, understand something. You know what I'm saying? Waste is, we're dealing with desolate, uncultivated land, right? Desolate. What's desolate? Desolate, right? Without companions. Also uninhabited, right? Make lonely, alone. Leave alone, desert, right? Desolate, right? A place of deserted of people. So understand, right? A waste is a desolate, uncultivated region, right? Uncultivated region. So there's some etymology on cultivate, and to cultivate literally means to till, right? Cultivus, tilled, right? Care, labor, cultivation, right? To till, right? So understand something. If a waste is uncultivated land, that means it's untilled land, right? And that can be validated because what? It's desolate. Desolate means uninhabited, right? Right? Lonely, right? Alone. What is man's duty? Man's duty is to cultivate the land, right? To till it, right? To till the ground, to till the soil, to dress and keep the garden. So if a land is uninhabited, that means there's no man to cultivate or till the ground, thus leaving it as a uncultivated or desolate, right? Deserted land, right? You feel what I'm saying? Alright, so when we put that into perspective with the verse, we kind of get a deeper understanding of what the Most High is saying. He say, they shall build the old wastes, right? What's a waste? A waste is a desolate, uncultivated land, right? Because there's no man to till it, so it's uncultivated. So they shall raise up the former desolations, and they shall repair the waste cities, and the desolations of many generations. So they got me thinking like, okay, they gonna go into the land that's uncultivated and do just that, right? Cultivate it, right? Go into the lands that's not inhabited and inhabit them, right? All right, and so when I came, back over here to Ezekiel 36, I found that it was just that, right? Starting at verse 33, it reads, it says, "Thus saith the Lord God, in the day that I shall have cleansed you from all your iniquity, he say, I will cause you to dwell in the cities, and the waste shall be builded, right? So the uncultivated and desolated regions shall be cultivated, dressed, and kept, you know what I'm saying? And the desolate land shall be tilled, right? Just like what we said, right? And the desolate land shall be tilled, whereas it lay desolate in the sight of all that passed by. And they shall say, this land that was desolate is become like the Garden of Eden, and the waste and desolate ruined cities are become fenced and inhabited. All right, so now check that out. So it's literally saying that the land, like a passerby would look at a piece of land and know that nobody was living on it. It was uninhabited and it wasn't cultivated, right? So it was just wasteland, you know what I'm saying? And then upon your arrival, right, and you fulfill the prophecy, then that person would pass by the same plot of land and say, well, like it says, this land that was desolate, uninhabited, right, has become like the Garden of Eden, right? Has become cultivated, right? Tilled. You feel what I'm saying? Farmed. You feel me? And the waste and desolate and ruined cities are become fenced and are inhabited, right? Man is there to do his duty, right? Which is cultivate and till the land. So even when you go into the Strongs of these verses, right, where it says right here, the desolate and ruined cities are become fenced. Even if you go into the Strongs of the Hebrew word for garden, you see it's gone, right? And it comes from 1598, meaning a garden as fenced, right? So think about that. And the desolate and ruined cities are become fenced, right? So fence, that fence, right? It is also associated with the word garden. So I feel like that's very interesting, right? Then the heathen that are left round about you shall know that I, the Lord, build the ruined places and plant that was desolate, right, uncultivated, and I, the Lord, have spoken it, and I will do it, right? So understand that this is talking about all right, let's keep reading. Hold on. Thus saith the Lord God, I will yet for this matter be inquired of by the house of Israel to do it for them. I will increase them with men like a flock. As the holy flock, as the flock of Jerusalem in her solemn feast, so shall the waste cities be filled with flocks of men, and they shall know that I am the Lord, right? So understand, right? The righteous are going to go back to obeying the Most High's voice in the duty of men, and they're going to cultivate and till the uncultivated and tilled places, right? The abandoned, left alone places, right? And they're going to turn those lands back into gardens, right? Farmland, they're going to farm, turn them back into gardens, right? The land will literally become like the Garden of Eden again. All right, so understand that, right? We're talking about turning a desolate place into a garden, right? By placing the righteous man in it so he can do his duty. Now, when I thought about this, about a desolate, dry place becoming a garden again, or a desolate, uncultivated place becoming a garden again, made me think of Isaiah 35, right? Remember, we've been digging on Isaiah 35. And so it says, the ransom shall return, right? Return. All right, the wilderness, all right, and the solitary place, right? Because if it's solitary, that means it's left alone. No one is inhabiting it. I mean, if you were to go out there, you would be the only one. So man is not there doing his duty. So the land is a wilderness. So shall be glad for them, and the desert, right, shall rejoice and blossom as the rose. It shall blossom abundantly, right? So we talking about the wilderness, right? And the desert rejoicing and blossoming, right? Providing and producing vegetation. And rejoice even with the joy and singing, and the glory of Lebanon shall be given unto it, and the excellency of Carmel, right? Now that's very important, right? We're going to get back to that. Say, and Sharon, they shall see the glory of the Lord and the excellency of our God, right? Strengthen ye the weak hands and confirm the feeble knees, right? Say to them that are of a fearful heart, be strong, fear not. Behold, your God will come with vengeance, even God with the recompense. He will come and save you, right? Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened, and the ears of the deaf shall be unstopped. Then shall the lame man leap as a hart. And let me go to the King James real quick. All right. Then shall the lame man leap as a hart, and the tongue of the dumb shall sing. For check this out. For in the wilderness shall waters break out, and the streams in the desert, right? And the parched ground shall become a pool, and the thirsty land springs of water, right? And in the habitation of dragons where each lay shall be grasses with reeds and rushes. Now understand, so we talking about vegetation popping up and water popping up, right? The just dry, thirsty ground becoming water, right? Well water, becoming Damascus. You feel what I'm saying? So, and we know we talking about the same drought, because remember the cherub with the cherub that made the land cherub or cherub. We dealing with the same thing, because even when you go to the Strongs right here in the Hebrew, right? Remember it's saying the perch ground, right? The thirsty ground, because we talking about drought. We talking about dry land. Look at the Strong for parched ground. It's sharab, right? Sharab, meaning to glare, to glow, right? Eventually mirage, heat, parched ground, right? Because even back in Ezekiel 36, verse 35, you had waste, and the Hebrew word for it was cherub, right? Cherub, from 27:17, parched or ruined, desolate, dry waste. So you see the waste, the cherub is dealing with parched. So you know that the other word in Isaiah 35 is stemming from the same root, or concerning the same thing, right? The thirsty land, the parched ground, right? The cherub, right? That was made cherub and cherub by the cherub of the cherub. You feel what I'm saying? Alright, so you can see that the land that was made drought, dry, and thirsty will literally become well watered, and then vegetation will even blossom, spring up. And actually, not only will it spring up, but it will blossom abundantly, right? So we see this land being turned into a garden, right? This dry, desolate land. So now right here it says, it shall blossom abundantly and rejoice even with joy and singing. It says the glory of Lebanon shall be given unto it, and the excellency of Carmel and Sharon, and they shall see the glory of the Lord. Now this is very important, right? Because we talking about the glory of Lebanon and the excellency of Carmel be given to this wilderness and this desert, right? Or this deserted, uncultivated place. Because understand, desert and wilderness are very synonymous and used in place of each other in the Bible, right? And used interchangeably, excuse me. So when you understand, right, that this wilderness and this desert is being associated with Lebanon and Carmel, right? In aspect to it becoming a garden, that brings me to a verse that I ran into in Isaiah 29. Now we at Isaiah 35, so you go to Isaiah 29 and you go to verse 17, you'll see say, right, is it not yet a very little while, and Lebanon shall be turned into a fruitful field, right? And the fruitful field shall be esteemed as a forest. All right, so understand that. Now we always been talking about Lebanon. That's what it's always been about them cedars, right? Lebanon, separation, purification, going into the wilderness, right? And to be purified, you know what I'm saying? We looking at the Essenes, they went to Damascus and Lebanon, right? And as well as Carmel, as I'm finding, you know what I'm saying? And separated themselves and purified themselves. Now, like I say, we've been digging on the wilderness in Lebanon, right, where the cedars are, and it say, and Lebanon shall be turned into a fruitful field, right? Is it not yet a little while? So he basically like telling, like, is it not only a matter of time before Lebanon literally is turned into a fruitful field, right? A garden. And the fruitful field shall be esteemed as a forest, right? As a forest. All right, so now when you understand that, it was very interesting, because I think I accidentally stumbled upon this. Like I went to the Brent Septuagint somehow and looked at this verse, and it was interesting because everywhere it had fruitful field, it said Carmel, right? It said, is it not yet a little while Lebanon, right? Lebanon shall be changed as the mountains of Carmel, right? And Carmel shall be reckoned as a forest. All right, so understand that. So, you know what I'm saying? Everywhere the word fruitful field is in the Brent Septuagint, it has Carmel. But even when you go into the Strong's Concordance, right, into the Hebrew for the verse, you see where it says fruitful field, the Strong's, the Hebrew word, it's literally Carmel, right? Carmel literally means a planted field, a garden, right? A vineyard, a park, by implication, a garden, right? To produce. So, when you see in Isaiah 35, where the scriptures say that the wilderness shall bear the glory of Lebanon and the excellency of Carmel, then you see right here at 29, where Lebanon shall literally become as Carmel as a fruitful field, right? And or literally a garden. Alright, so I wanna come over here and dig on Mount Carmel just a little bit, right? Carmel, right? Ha Carmel, right? Remember that word means the fruitful field. Alright, there's a coastal mountain range in northern Israel stretching from the Mediterranean towards the southeast, right? Okay. Alright, the name is presumed to be directly from the Hebrew language Carmel, which means fresh, planted, or vineyard planted, right? The phrase Mount Carmel has been used in three distinct ways. Alright, so catch the drop, look at that. I just wanted to get that. You see this right here. You see what we're looking at, right? We're dealing with some green belt looking land, right? Alright. So I want to come over here and just get this right quick. Alright. Carmel, right? From the Bible study tools. Alright. Fruit garden. You see what I'm saying? A beautifully wooded mountain range running for about 13 miles in a southeasterly direction. Alright, southeast, right? Alright, so it's from the promontory which drops on the shores. From the promontory which drops on the shores near Haifa at the southern extremity of the plain of Acre. Right? You know what I'm saying? So you get some stuff right here, right? It's the prominent, the monastery of Elias, right? The monastery of Elijah stands on that mountain where they got it there, because this mountain Carmel is associated with is very associated with Elijah, right? This is the place where Elijah stood and displayed the power of the Most High over the power of Baal, right? So he was very associated with this mountain. And that's very important too, because we know that Elijah is the purifier of this priesthood, right? So it says the Carmel still justifies name the garden with fruit trees. You feel what I'm saying, right? So long fertile valleys where the excellency of Carmel finds full illustration today, right? So when it says that the wilderness in the desert, right, the excellency of Carmel shall come to it. We know we talking about long, fertile valleys, right? Springs of good water. You know what I'm saying? So when we digging on Carmel, we talking about a garden. We talking about a fruitful garden, a lush garden, right? Okay, so when you understand, you also find a heavy presence of the Essenes at Mount Carmel. A lot of them left, and they say they went to Mount Carmel, right? With the Essenes of Mount Carmel in northern Israel, say Yeshua was primarily associated with the Essenes of Mount Carmel in northern Israel, not the Essenes of the Qumran in southern Israel, right? Right, because even as they said here, right, Lebanon, right, of northern Israel shall be turned into Carmel, right, a fruitful field. So we know the Essenes associated with Lebanon as well, right, Damascus, and we know that they also went to Carmel, which is the garden, the fruitful field, right? So it's very interesting, because it will have you think, man, when you read the Essene documents, you know that these are, they live by natural law. They vegans. They eat the produce of the earth. So you know that they had to be gardening, right? They had to be cultivating the land. And so when you think about the Essenes going into the desert, a dry place, is it makes you wonder, You know, was they out there cultivating the desert? Like, how were they able to reproduce, or did they turn the desert into a fruitful field, into Mount Carmel, or did they turn Lebanon into Mount Carmel? You know what I'm saying? Or Carmel, or fruitful field, or garden, or something of that nature, right? So, you know, it's very interesting, right? Remember, they went to Damascus. Damascus means well watered, right? So, if the land was well watered, then it wasn't necessarily dry or a drought, right? Or did it become well watered when they got there, right? Because if we go back and we see, right, the similarities of this verse, digging back on Isaiah 35, we see that the wilderness and the solitary place shall be glad for them, and the desert shall rejoice and blossom as a rose. It shall blossom abundantly, and rejoice even with joy and singing, right? The glory of Lebanon shall be given it to it, right? Whiteness and purity, and the excellency of Carmel, right? And Sharon, right? The long fertile valleys. You feel what I'm saying? So, and then as you can see, upon that these waters break out and literally make the dry land Damascus, right? Well watered. You feel what I'm saying? So, upon understanding, you have to ask yourself, why would the wilderness and the desert rejoice and be glad for these people, right? And the answer is because these are the ones who are coming back to cultivate and till the land. They coming back to dress and keep it, right? If the land is uncultivated and untilled, then and it is deserted, it is left alone, then the land will rejoice when those righteous ones come back to dress it, keep it, make it a garden, right? Turn it back into a garden again. You feel what I'm saying? So then, right, because when you look at desert, right, desert is a wasteland, right? An uncultivated land, right? Desert, wilderness, wasteland, destruction, right? Thing abandoned, right? Use and vulgate to translate wilderness. See what I'm saying? Is used is in a place of wilderness, and vice versa, right? To forsake, right? To desert, because we know desert, right, as a verb means to leave one's duty, to leave, literally undo, sever connection, right? To abandon, to leave, to forsake, to give up, to leave and lurk. You see what I'm saying? So a desert is deserted land, right? Land that has been left. Man is no longer living there. It is not cultivated, right? Or it is not turned into a garden. All right. So when you see the desert, right, the deserted and left alone place rejoicing and being glad for them, that's because the deserted place, the lonely place, is now going to be cultivated and dressed, right? Man is going to come back unto it to do his purpose. You feel what I'm saying? And the land knows it, right? Remember when King Drop was dropping that video about the plants, right? The trees, how they're alive, right? How they communicate, right? To remember the dude who was reading the electromagnetic waves that the plants was sending and seeing how it was responding to everything. Remember how he was like, he wanted to see if he can get a reaction out of the plant, and he said he was like, what can I do to get a reaction out of this plant? He thought fire. He was like, okay, I'm gonna go get some fire and put it up to the plant and see if the plant will do anything, right? If I can get any electromagnetic signals, right, from it or anything like that. So he said that as soon as he thought of fire, as soon as the thought of fire popped in his head, he said the plant went off the meter, like the electromagnetic wave that it was sending was just going off, like as if the plant was screaming, like, no, don't do what you thinking about doing. Like the plant knew what he was thinking. The plant knows his intent, right? The plant had the ability to understand his intent without him even doing it, saying it, right? The plant had the ability to know what he was thinking, right? So understand that, right? The land knows your intent. So when the righteous return to the land with the intent to cultivate it, dress it, and keep it, the land knows that and will rejoice because of it. Because it's going to be turned back into a garden again. It's not going to be abandoned, right? It's going to be inhabited, dressed, and kept. Okay, because it's almost like a widow or a wife, right? That her husband has left her, right? She's lonely. She's abandoned, right? She's barren. She's bearing no fruit because there is no man to plant a seed in her, right? So, you know what I'm saying? And the land is the same way. Why do you think taking care of the land and keeping it is called what? It's called husbandry, right? Husbandry, to care, the care, cultivation, right? Tilling and breeding of crops and animals, right? Husbandry is the cultivation and the caring of crops and animals, of land and animals. So understand, right? The land is deserted. It's like a widow, right? Whose husband has left it. That's why when his husband is there in union, it's called husbandry, because the husband is protecting, providing, and caring for the land. It is no longer deserted. So with that, being said, I'm thinking like, man, so these righteous ones, right, are coming back into desolate and uncultivated, undressed, unkept regions, and continuing in the practice of the duty of man to keep, dress, cultivate the land, right, and turn those desolate and unkept places into gardens, right, turning the land into like a Garden of Eden, right? So with that concept, I'm like, man, that's kind of crazy, right? So when you go to Isaiah 35, right, and after we was reading where the land will literally become a garden, right? It will literally be given the excellency of Carmel, these long and fertile valleys, right? Lebanon is wooded forest. It will blossom as a rose. Waters will break out, making it well watered as Damascus, you know what I'm saying? And reeds, rushes, vegetation and stuff like that will start to spring. So once you get that, it jumps right into verse 8 and it starts talking about this highway, right? It says, and a highway shall be there, and a way, and it shall be called the way of holiness. The unclean shall not pass over it, but it shall be for those, the wayfaring men, though fools shall not err therein, right? Excuse me. It says, no lion shall be there, nor any ravenous beast shall go upon thereon, and it shall be not found there, right? It shall be not found there, but the redeemed shall walk therein, and the ransom of the Lord shall return and come to Zion with songs of and everlasting joy upon their head. They shall obtain joy and gladness, and sorrow and sighing and fling away. So, all right, so upon this land, right, turning into a fruitful field, a garden again, a well-watered garden, right, like the Eden, how it was watered by the 4 rivers. It goes on to talk about this highway, right? Now this highway being there. All right, so now we know this highway and this way of holiness is stemming from Isaiah 40, right? 5 chapters up. All right, and it's talking about, right, in verse 3, the voice of him that crieth in the wilderness, prepare ye the way of the Lord, make straight in the desert, right, a highway for our God. Now, when you understand what this verse is saying, it's really crazy, right? And we know that the Essene, right, the righteous one, John, in the New Testament, he proclaimed and he asserted this verse right here as a right, and we're gonna get that. We're gonna build on that real quick. All right, so when we go over here to John chapter 1 verse 19, the testimony of John the Baptist, right? And they said, this is the record of John, right? When the Jews sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, who is he, right? So now we got officials that's coming to see who John is. What is he doing out here? He's in the wilderness baptizing people. He's going against the scribes, the Pharisees, or the law that they have given, right? Which would have been made the law of the land. So he's almost like, what I'm saying? So they going out there to see what's going on. And it says, and he confessed and denied not, but confessed. Now look at that. Check that out. That's very interesting, right? Because it sounds like court. It says he confessed and denied not, but confessed, right? He did not agree to this corporate fiction version of him that they were coming with. He confessed, right, and denied not, but confessed, I am not the Christ. And they asked him, what then art thou, Elias? He said, I am not. They say, art thou that prophet? And he answered, no. Then they said, who art thou, right? So they come and ask him, like, are you the Christ? He say, no. Right? And you say, well, are you Elijah? And he was like, no. He's like, are you that prophet? And he's like, no. He say, so then they said unto him, well, who are you? Like, right? So who are you? He say, that we may give an answer to them that sent us. What sayest thou of thyself? Right? So understand that, right? They asking, who are you? What are you doing out here? What's your business, right? What's your purpose out here? What are you doing? What's your authority, right? So that we may tell those who sent us, right? Because we talking about priests, Levi, we talking about officials, right? We talking about law administrators. You feel what I'm saying? So he said, I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness. Make straight the way of the Lord, as said the prophet Isaiah. So when you understand what's going on right here, John is quoting the prophet Isaiah, and it's for a reason, man. He's professing a right. He's proclaiming a right. Man, that I find is very interesting when you break down this verse in Isaiah 40. So let's get to it. All right, so John has quoted this verse, right, as his identity, right, to these Pharisees, these Levites, these priests, these government officials, right. Now understand something. The voice of him that crieth in the wilderness, like John said, I am the voice of him that crieth in the wilderness, right? So now, like I've said, I've already showed, right, when you understand that that first part, what could he be talking about? What is John necessarily doing in the wilderness? And remember how we were talking about proclamations, right? And claims. So let's get some etymology. All right, so when you get into the etymology of the word proclaim, right, as a verb, late 14th century, proclamen, from Latin, proclamare, to cry, right, cry or call out. All right, understand, etymology behind the word proclaim was to cry or call out, right? Pro, forth, forward, all right, clamere, to cry out. So that root, right, claim, clamere, means to cry out, to shout. All right, let's go over here to the etymology on the word claim. Right, a claim, right, is a demand of a right, right of claiming. Claim, complaint, right, claim, meaning thing claimed or demanded, right? Check this out. Piece of land allotted and taken, right? Remember that word take when we were looking in the etymology of redeem? So piece of land allotted and taken, okay? All right, application, guarantee, compensation, all right, check that out, right? So as a verb, a claim means to call out, to ask or demand by virtue of right or authority, right? To call, name, describe, claim, complain, declare, from Latin clamere, to cry out, shout, proclaim, right? To shout. So now understand that to claim literally means to call out, right? The root of the word claim literally means to cry out. So when you understand proclaim and claim, you're dealing with to call out, to cry out, or to cry, and to shout. All right. So let's go back to the verse. Right. So the verse says in 40 verse 3, it says the voice of him that crieth. Right. So when you go into the Strong's, we see that the word voice right here, the Strong's is 6963, literally means it is cold, right? Cold. From an unusual root, meaning to call aloud, right? A voice, aloud, right? And you see down in it, it says proclaim, proclamation, right? So the voice literally means to call aloud, just as the etymology of the word claim means to do what? To call out, right? Then you go into the word crieth, right? And you see the Strong for it is H7121. And this kara, a primitive root rather identical with 7122, though. Excuse me, hold on. Get that back up. Though idea of accosting a person meant to call out, right? Look in the word, right? Bid and call forth, self upon, cry unto, right? Proclaim, right? So when you look at this word cry, it literally means what? To call out, right? To call out, just as what? The etymology of claim means to call out, right? to cry out. So when you understand what this verse is saying, it says the voice that crieth, right, in the wilderness. When you implement the etymology in the Hebrew words, we literally talking about the proclamation of a claim, right? The voice of him that crieth is the proclamation of a claim in the wilderness, right? Now, when you understand a wilderness, what is a wilderness? Let's get it. All right, when you go into wilderness, now the etymology behind that is wild, uninhabited, or uncultivated place, right? Wild, uninhabited, or uncultivated place. Okay, wild, you go to wild, right? The etymology behind wild, in the natural state, uncultivated, untamed, undomesticated, uncontrolled. You see what I'm saying? So a wild or wilderness is a wild, uninhabited, uncultivated place. And we know if it's uninhabited, it's uncultivated because man is not there to do his duty, right? Till the earth. That's why I had you remember when we were digging on the green belts, right? That the green belts was used in large use planning to retain areas of largely undeveloped, wild or agricultural land. So cultivated or uncultivated or cultivated, right? Cultivated or uncultivated land, right? So that's very important when we understand these green belts. All right, so when you see, right, what it's saying, right, if we know that the wilderness is an uncultivated or uninhabited place, look at what it's saying. It's saying the voice of him that crieth in the wilderness, or the proclamation of a claim on uncultivated or uninhabited land, right? Or in the uncultivated and inhabited land. All right. So understand when John was quoting that, what he was saying. He said, I am the proclamation of a claim upon uncultivated and unkept land, right? All right, so let's finish before we break it all down, right? He said, prepare ye the way of the Lord. Now let's focus on this part, right? It says, prepare ye the way of the Lord, right? And make straight in the desert a highway for our God, right? I'm going to show you this verse right here is completely Edenic, right? We're talking about the whole duty of man, his purpose, and going back to that, right? And reforming the earth into a garden, right? So we see, prepare ye the way of the Lord. Now, when you look at the Strongs right here, you get panah, right? 6437, and it means to turn, right? But it's used here as prepare. So let's get a little bit of etymology on that. All right, panah, right? Panah, primitive root, right? So as you can see, to turn, right? To turn toward, right? From or away. To turn, to do, right? To turn, decline of day. Turn toward, right? Now understand, right here it shows you how many times it's used as whatever word is used as. So right here you can see it's used 53 times as the word turn, and 42 times as the word look, right? Because it also means to look, right? Panah, primitive root, to turn, implication to face, right? To look, right? Appear, even at time, behold, right? All right. As you can see, it also got prepare, regard, respect, right? Regard and respect. Have respect too, right? Regard. All right. So as we said, it's used this term 53 times in the Bible, and look 42 times in the Bible, but it's only used as prepare 6 times in the Bible, right? And it's used as regard and respect as well. So as you can see, the bulk of the word mainly means to turn or to look, right? To turn, to look back after, to look back or at or after, right? To look after or to look at. You feel what I'm saying? So the word mainly means to turn to and do, to turn to look, right? So when you understand that right there, that's only dealing with one thing, right? That's dealing with keep. All right, so when you go into the etymology of keep, right? A noun first, then you get care or heed in watching, right? Watching. All right, so as a verb, right? Because we're dealing with to keep, right? To seize, hold, seek after, desire, also to observe or carry out in practice. look out for, regard, pay attention to, right? To observe is to look, right? To see, to behold, right? To observe or carry out in practice, to look out for, regard, pay attention, which is uncertain, right? All right, look, to guard, to defend, right? To take care of, look after, protect, preserve, right? So if Adam is there to keep, the guard needs to look after it, to take care of it, to protect it, preserve it, right? So understand that when you see this word right here, panah, for prepare, to turn to look, right? Right, panah, right? Regard, respect, turn to look, right? Turn to and do, turn to look after, to look at, right? When you understand that, we know that's dealing with what? That's dealing with keep, right? To keep, right? To observe, to look out for, to regard, right? To pay attention to, right? To observe and practice, to keep the law of the Most High, right? So when we look at the verse, we see what it's saying, right? Prepare ye the way of the Lord. No, keep ye the way of the Lord, right? One and the same though, but when you understand that keep ye the way of the Lord, we dealing with observance of his laws, right? To obey his voice, right? As the duty of man, right? The whole reason Adam fell because he didn't obey his voice. Remember the Most High tell you, obedience is better than sacrifice, right? I didn't command your forefathers concerning sacrifice. I only command them in obedience. What did he command Adam to do? How did he command Adam to live? Adam disobeyed the voice. That's why we have to go through this. So the whole purpose is to reverse that and obey the voice, right? So, and right here we talking about the voice, right? So it's very interesting. So when we see prepare ye the way of the Lord, we're dealing with keep, right? Because even like Moses proclaimed in front of Pharaoh and said, let us go into the wilderness where we may serve our Lord, right? Where we may keep the customs of our God. You feel what I'm saying? So then when you look at this verse, this part of the verse, it says, make straight in the desert a highway for our God, right? So prepare, right? We're dealing with keep ye the way of the Lord. Now check this out. When you look at make straight and you go into the etymology for the word dress, guess what you get? Dress, verb, early 14th century. Make straight, direct, guide, control, prepare for cooking, right? Right, even prepare, right? Arrange, set up, order. You feel what I'm saying? Serve, right? Minister to. You feel what I'm saying? Dress, but direct, straight, set straight. You feel what I'm saying? To direct, guide, keep straight. Dress literally means to make straight. Now you can have a better understanding when you read Genesis 2:15. And the Lord God took the man and put him in the garden of Eden to dress it and keep it, right? That's the duty of the man, right? Right? That was his job, right? That's his work, right? When you look at creation, every animal in nature, everything in nature works, right? It ministers, it serves its purpose, right? The bees, right? When they do their thing, right? Everything, you know what I'm saying? The birds, the animals, the insects, they all serve their purpose. They're all working. Man's work was to dress and keep the garden. Now he has forgot his job, right? So he is not no longer, he's the only one not doing what he's supposed to do. He's not working, right? He's not enacting the code that was placed in his genetics. So now everything is going haywire. But understand that, right? His work, his job was to dress and keep. So that was his payment, right? That was his work. That was his compensation, right? To dress and keep the garden and experience the earthly paradise. You feel what I'm saying? His payment for being in the garden was to dress and keep it, right? So when you did not offer that payment, he got kicked out of the garden. All right. So, when man doesn't give that payment of his divine service to dress and keep, he becomes in debt, right? He no longer is paying for the land that he's on, right? So you eventually get the boot, or you become a debtor, and then you have to give free labor or bondage, right? Because you owe, right? Now you have to go into servitude. All right, so coming back, all right, so coming back to this verse, we can understand what's being said here, right? The voice of him that crieth in the wilderness, prepare ye the way of the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Understand what this is saying. This is talking about the proclamation of him, the proclamation of a claim on uncultivated and uninhabited land to keep the way of the Most High and dress the land that is not being dressed and kept, right? Because it's deserted. You feel what I'm saying? He say, a highway for our God. Now, what's also interesting too is when you look at this word highway, right? And you see the Strong's for it is 4546, right? But it means a thoroughfare, a turnpike, a staircase, right? Causeway, course, highway, path, terrace. Now check out that last word, terrace, because that's very interesting to me. All right, so the Strong's was 4546 for the word highway there, right? And we see we're talking about causeway, pathway, way, course, terrace, right? Now understand a highway, the word means a highway or a raised way, a public road. All right, so I want to focus on terrace, right? Like I say, because it was very interesting. So we're dealing with terrace. We're dealing with right, gallery, portico, balcony, later flat, raised place of walking, right? Like it I think it was right here. Is that what it was? No, let me go back. It said raised place for walking. Remember in the Strong's how it was like raised place, right? Platform, building, right? A mound of earth, right? Earth and earthly, right? Earthland, terra, earthland, right? As a national formation in geography attested from 1670s, in the street names originally in reference to a row of houses along the top of a slope, but lately applied arbitrarily to a fancy name for an ordinary road, right? So that's very interesting, right? How terraces need this raised place for walking, and it's also referred to as a road. But we know when we think of terraces, the first thing I think of, okay, terrace, right? A level paved area or platform next to a building. But like I say, first thing I think of when I hear terrace is these, right? Right? So when I hear terrace, I go to think about these right here, right? These terraces they use for farming and gardening, right? And where you see these, you see how fertile and lush the land is. And we see this a lot in our heritage, right? A lot in our ancient sacred land down there. Like you see, I think this probably Machu Picchu or something right here. But you see these terraces, man, are dealing with farmlands, right? These raised staircases, right? Even as the, let's see, where were we? Highway, right? You see it right there, staircase, causeway, right? So you see these terraces, man, and even when you look at like terrace gardening, let's see if we can get it real quick. It's dealing with a garden, a raised garden, right? A garden that's on this terrace, on this platform high, right? So the word there is highway. You know what I'm saying? But it also means a terrace, but we're talking about raised walkways, raised terraces, right? But like I say, this whole verse is Edenic. So when you understand it, we're talking about a proclamation of a claim on uncultivated and uninhabited land to keep the way of the Most High and to dress the uncultivated and unkept land, right? And to make a terrace or a raised garden for our God, right? A highway for our God. What's a highway, right? A highway for our God would be a highway for him to travel among, right? Remember in the Garden of Eden, God came down and walked amongst Adam in the garden. We talking about an organic environment, right? So when we creating a highway for our God, we creating a walkway, a causeway, a garden for the Lord to come and dwell amongst us and teach us as he did Adam. All right, so understand what's going on here, right? So when when John the Baptist quotes this verse, right, we got to understand what John's saying, right? When they come and ask him, who is he, who is what, what are you, what we gonna tell the people who sent us, what we gonna tell the government officials, he said, tell them this. He said what? He said, I am the proclamation of a claim of uncultivated and unkept land, right? To dress, right? To dress the way of the Lord, as said the prophet Isaiah, to make straight the way of the Lord, as said the prophet Isaiah. So he's basically saying, right, this is a proclamation and a claim on unkept land to dress it and keep it, right? In the way of the Lord, as said Isaiah. So he's professing the right, because if you understand the right that he's professing, we can go back to Isaiah 40, right? Because when you go down, right, in verse 6 it said, the voice said cry, right? So this proclamation, right, said claim, right? The proclamation said claim, and he said, well, what should I claim, right? What should I cry? What should I proclaim? And he said that all flesh is grass, and all the goodliness thereof is as the flower of the field. The grass withereth, the flower fadeth, but the Spirit of the Lord bloweth upon it. Surely the people is grass, right? The grass withereth, the flower fadeth, but the word of God shall stand forever. So the voice is literally telling him to proclaim the word of God. That's where your rights come from. That's where your sovereignty come from. That's where your inheritance come from, right? So the voice is literally telling him to proclaim the word of God, because why? He said the flesh is as grass, right? And the goodliness thereof, right? The goodliness of the flesh is as the flower of the field. Now we know the flower is the fruit, right? The fruit of a plant is its flower. So the flower of the fruit of the flesh, right? All the flesh is grass, and the goodliness of the fruit of that flesh of the field, right? The grass withereth and the flower fadeth, because the Spirit of the Lord bloweth upon it. Surely the people is grass. So this is saying that flesh, man, and all his fruits, all the things he creates, all the legal systems, the man-made legal systems that he forms and put in the jurisdiction, all that will wither and fade away. Is temporary, doesn't last forever. The only thing that stands forever is the word of God, right? So that is your liberty. That is your proclamation, right? That is your legal systems, right? Proclaim that, because that has stood the passages of time, right? It stands forever. Okay, so we understand what John was saying when he quoted this verse. He was literally professing a right. He was proclaiming his rights by professing and proclaiming the word of God, right? And we even know, even in America, in this government, that Congress, according to Public Law 97-280, has declared the Bible the word of God. So he was quoting the Bible because it's the word of God, and professing his rights from that, right? And the right which he was proclaiming, right, was a proclamation on the claim of uncultivated and unkept land, right? To keep the way of the Most High, right? The duty of man to dress and keep the land that's not been dressed and kept, right? So he can create an environment for his creator. You feel what I'm saying? Now, when you understand the right that he's proclaiming, this right here is talking about adverse possession. All right, so now I don't want you to go crazy when I mention adverse possession. Just rock with me and see where I'm going. All right, the adverse possession is the occupation of land to which another person has the title with the intention of possessing it as one's own. All right, so let's get into it just a little bit. All right, adverse possession, sometimes colloquially known as squatter's rights, right, is a legal principle that applies when a person does not have a legal title to a piece of property, usually land, real property, and attempts to claim legal ownership based on history of possession or occupation of the land without the permission of its legal owner. In general, a property owner has the right to recover possession of their property from unauthorized possessors through legal actions such as injectment. However, it is English common law traditions, of course, have long ruled that when somebody occupies a piece of property without permission and the property owner does not exercise their right to recover their property for a significant period of time, not only is the original owner prevented from exercising their right to exclude, but an entirely new title to the property springs up in the adverse possessor. Right? In effect, the adverse possessor becomes the property's new owner. Right? So understand what they're saying. Basically, what they're saying is somebody has a piece of property, right? They have deserted it or abandoned it, right? They don't really use the property anymore, right? They have not been dressing or keeping it, right? Somebody can come along and make a adverse possession claim and literally dress and keep the land, and if they do that for a certain amount of time, the land becomes theirs, and it's by legal right, and the courts will literally draw up a new title, and that person would possess the title to that land. All right. So do your research on adverse possession, how it works. But basically, if that landowner doesn't profess his rights over the land, doesn't profess his rights or display the fact that he is actually using the land, he is dressing and keeping it, then that opens the window for an adverse possessor to come and take his land. Because we got to understand, right? The land is the creator. You can't buy it, so nobody really owns it. You're only sojourners and strangers in his land. So you can only occupy it, you can only squat on it as long as you're given the payment of dressing and keeping, right? So if you're not dressing and keeping your law, then that means that somebody else can come, and if they choose to dress and keep the land, they can. Because this is the creator's land, is to be dressed and kept, right? That is the duty of man. So if that man is not keeping his duty, then that can open the door for somebody who will come and keep that duty to do just that, right? And they will become the legal title owners of the land. So now, just to get a little deep into it, right? Let's go over here and look at some adverse possession laws in certain states, right? I chose Tennessee because, we were digging on the South, we were digging on Cherokee and things like that, and I was looking at Tennessee for a number of reasons. And so I just want to read the adverse possession laws in Tennessee, right? All right, so says like most states, right? It says, like most states, adverse possession in Tennessee can be proven based on the character of the trespasser's possession and at the length of time he or she possesses the land. A trespasser's possession must be, now these are the laws required for adverse possession, right? It must be hostile against the right of the true owner and without permission, meaning that you must literally go on the property and occupy it without permission, right? And against the right of the true owner, right? It says actual, meaning exercising control over the property, meaning it must not be secretive. You must display the fact that you are actually there, that the property is actually being used, right? Whether that be you put cattle on it, you put a farmhouse, you put whatever it may be, you fence it up, you lock it up, but you must exercise control over the property, right? And exclusive in the possession of the trespasser alone, right? All right, so open and notorious, right? Using the property as the real owner would without hiding his or her occupancy, right? And continuous for the statute, right? Continuous for the statutory period, which is either 7 or 20 years in Tennessee, depending on the circumstance. So as you can see here, the statute of limitation on land is 20 years or 7, depending on the circumstances. So you have to occupy that land for either 20 or 7 years, right? So you got to dress it and keep it for a certain amount of time, then it's yours, right? So when you understand Isaiah 40 verse 3 and when John was quoting, John was literally proclaiming his right of adverse possession, right? It was the proclamation of a claim on the uncultivated and uninhabited land, right? To keep the way of the Most High on it by dressing and keeping the undressed and unkept land, the deserted land, the abandoned land, right? To create an environment sustainable for righteousness and in communion with the Creator. Now understand, desert, right? Mean deserted, leave, abandoned, right? So this is literally proclaiming the right of adverse possession, because we know an adverse possession is dealing with a owner who has abandoned his land, so he is no longer dressing and keeping it. He is no longer doing the duty of man on this particular land, which opens the doorway for the right of another person to come and fulfill his duty, the duty of man on that land, because you're no longer doing it. You're literally occupying the Most High's land and not paying for it. You can't do that. You feel what I'm saying? So when you understand what John was saying, he was saying, I'm just the proclamation of a claim on uncultivated, right, uninhabited land, right, to dress it, right, to dress the uncultivated and keep the uncultivated and uninhabited land. So he was basically adverse in land that had been abandoned, right, to create a sustainable environment for himself and for his creator, right, to fulfill the duty of man. Remember what Moses said, let us go into the wilderness where we may serve our God, where we may keep the way of the Most High. Remember the Most High say, in the wilderness will I plead with you face to face, right? Alright, so even when you look at adverse possession laws in Florida, right? Florida, straight up, the continuous for the statutory period, which is 7 years. So the statutory period in Florida is only 7 years for to occupy the title for the land. Now this is very interesting, because as we see in the verse, we see somebody or we talking about a proclaiming of the right of adverse possession, right? Where literally the payment for obtaining the land is literally keeping the Most High's ways on it, right? The duty of man to dress and keep, to cultivate the land. Okay, so when we see the Bible talk about, repairing the waste cities, raising up the former desolations, right? We see barren land being turned into a garden. We understand that the righteous was going into uninhabited, uncultivated, and undressed and unkept places, and dressing them, keeping them, turning them into gardens, right? Keeping the way of the Most High, creating a very organic, sacred and spiritual environment where the Most High could come and commune, right? Now understand, right? When we're dealing with, like I say, the word desert and the word desert and wilderness are very often interchangeable in the Bible. So when you think of desert and you think about this uncultivated land, understand this don't denote the most raggediest piece of land or the most unfertile and non-producing land. You know what I'm saying? When you go to Google and you type in uncultivated land, we're looking at land like this. You feel what I'm saying? Land that hasn't been cultivated, that hasn't been tilled, that hasn't been worked by the Most High. It could also mean those arid desert regions, but it's not limited to that. It just means land that's not being, that the duty of man is not being fulfilled on. You feel what I'm saying? Man is not cultivating. He's not dressing and keeping, right? So understand these regions, these fields, right, that's not being dressed and kept by man, are literally lands that the righteous should possess and turn into gardens again. Alright, so let's talk about sharecropping for a second. Right, so because especially when we talk about adverse possession, we got to understand sharecropping and adverse possession are some of the biggest ways we lost our land, right? Because we had family who were landowners, right? Especially coming from them Indian settlements, right? Their inheritances, their Levitical cities, their green belts, their fields that they were working, right? They were landowners, they were farmers, right? A lot of our ancestors was farmers, you know what I'm saying? So when you understand sharecropping, it was a very sleazy way that the Europeans tricked us out the land and received land titles. Look, even right here you see sharecropping, a system where a landowner allows a tenant to use the land in return for a share of harvest as payment, right? The dressing, of keeping the land, and the production of the fruit and vegetation was a payment. You feel what I'm saying? So let's get into sharecropping just real quick, just get another definition of it, right? So sharecropping is a form of agriculture in which a landowner allows a tenant to use the land in return for a share of crops produce on their portion of the land, right? Sharecropping has a long history, and there was a wide range of different situations and types of agreements that have used the form of the system. All right, so understand that, right? What you're dealing with is you dealing with right? You dealing with a land owner, right? Having land and allowing a tenant to work his land and bringing the revenue of it, well, the harvest of it, as payment, right? As payment. So they would split the crops. He would grow the land, he would grow the produce, and they would split it, right? Or he would go to town and the markets and sell it, and they would split the revenue, right? So when you look at it, from our perspective, right, we know that, like I say, our ancestors, right, were indigenous, to this land. They had the land, they had the farms, right? And so and look at the map, right? Notice how we're talking about the South, right? So a percentage of farms sharecropped by country, right? Notice how it's dealing with the South, right? So this is very relevant. So you understand the Indian, right? Your ancestors would have had a plot of land, right? The European would have came like, okay, man, they might not have had no land, or were trying to get situated and settle on the new promised land. So they come to the Indian and do business with the Indian, and they say, hey, you got this land, you got this large estate, right? Let me work a portion of it, right? I'll work it, right? And we can split the crops. You don't got to do nothing. I'll work it, man, and the whatever we grow from it, we can split it. And if I go and sell any of the produce, you know what I'm saying, we can split the revenue, right? So now what you understand, what you got to understand is the whole time the Indian isn't doing anything with the land, right? The European is dressing and keeping. You feel what I'm saying? The Indian, he might be gone. He might be going to another plot of land doing business with a tribe. You know what I'm saying? He might be gone for a long time. The whole time the tenant is sitting there working and dressing and keeping the land. Then the tenant goes behind the back of the Indian, right? And adverse possesses the land. He goes to the court and say, well, you know, judge, I've been dressing and keeping this land, right? I've been farming, tilling it, right? Doing the duty of man on this land. The landowner is nowhere to be found, or he's not doing nothing, right? So then by law, by adverse possession, the title gets given to the adverse possessor, right? To the tenant who was only working the land, who was only using the land, didn't own it. But since he was dressing and keeping it for a certain amount of time, he was given the land deed. So that was a very slimy way of the Europeans coming and taking the titles and receiving the land, as well as another way, right? We dealing with violence, and we're gonna get into that in a little bit. But as you can see, man, adverse possession was a very sleazy way that they came and took the land, right? They didn't buy it, they only dressed it and kept, because that's the only true payment for land, right? So, you know, and now you see these indigenous ones, or these landowners, literally out of their land, because of adverse possession, right? These Europeans came and adverse possessed the land that they were only using, right? I remember I was studying adverse possession, and this it was the video I was speaking, I was listening to the dude who was speaking. He was saying how he knew a case about, there was a guy who he had a neighbor, right, with some land in the back, and he asked the guy if he could use the land to hunt on it, right? So he used the land and he hunted on the land. The landowner never really used that land, that part of the land, right? So he gave it to him to hunt, right? So you know, it's like a wilderness. We talking about land with deers and stuff running through. We talking about bushes and wilderness, right? Uncultivated, unkept land. So he then went behind the back of the landowner and adverse possessed his land. He went to the courts and was like, you know, I've been hunting and I've been using this land. This landowner, he haven't been doing nothing with it, and I've been using it for years. I believe I have a right to own it, possess it. And he was given the title legally. You know what I'm saying? Through the laws of adverse possession. You feel me? So it was a real sleazy thing he did. And not only that, but there was a well on the land, right? The well on the land that the landowner was using, right? But it was on the part where he gave to the neighbor to hunt. So now that the neighbor has adverse possessed the land and the land has the well on it, he had it to where the landowner had to pay the adverse possessor for using the water because it's now on his property, man. It was very sleazy. It was very sleazy. It was very slimy. You know what I'm saying? Of a thing to do, right? To adverse possess his land like that. So what I want to do real quick. All right, man. So what I want to do right quick, man. I want to come over here to the Bro King Drain channel. His video, he had Confederacy against Judah land deeds, because he had some clips in there, man, that were very eye-opening. You feel what I'm saying? So I want to get a few clips in this, and I want you to pay attention to what's going on. You know what I'm saying? Especially dealing with adverse possession and things like that. So we're gonna get this right quick, just a little, about 2 or 3 minutes of it. So I asked that y'all rock with me, and let's go.
Our forefathers weren't the Pilgrims. We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. The rock was landed on us.
The notion of being driven from the land is the physical fact of what occurred. And so our effort went back to that fact as a way to get some compensation to the families who've been driven out.
And then you don't see the next deed. There's no sale from Joe Smith, the black landowner, to John Doe, who is white. As you go back down the chain of title, what you find is that at some point you run into a hearing for adverse possession.
Adverse possession is the way that people have of taking title to property without buying it. And it's of great relevance in these banishment cases because as soon as the African American owners are off the property, some white folks or other folks come on and start using it as though it's theirs, and then after a period of time, it is theirs. Right? And so what you have is this combination of violence with the legal system. Violence to run folks off, and then the legal system to change title. Legal system to change title. Legal system to change title. Legal system to change title.
One of the interesting things about the Morgan Strickland land is that there was obviously an attempt to cure the title by adverse possession. Morgan Strickland buys the land. Morgan Strickland buys the land. Morgan Strickland buys the land.
You may not have heard of the Moorish Nationals, but police have members claim to follow Moorish science. It comes from a black religious group that's been around for nearly a century. Most of its members obey the law, but not everyone. Chip Reed looks at how some use their religion to justify the crime.
This 35,000 square foot mansion in an exclusive corner of Bethesda, Maryland, has 12 bedrooms, 17 bathrooms, and trees planted by President Clinton and Vice President Gore. On the market for nearly $6 million, it's not exactly a steal. So imagine real estate agent Jordan Feinberg's surprise when he learned someone had moved into the vacant property.
The owner calls me again and says, the neighbor called, there are people inside the house claiming they own the house. And I'm like, what?
Lamont Butler, a.k.a. Lamont Maurice L., claimed the mansion for himself. He even provided documents issued by the so-called Moorish National Republic to back it up.
It's a burglary in the purest sense.
Across the country, Butler and many other self-styled Moorish nationals have laid claim to property and status they say is lawfully theirs because their ancestors were here first. In Memphis, Tennessee, Tabitha Gentry staked a claim on this $3 million foreclosed home using heavy chains. Charged with trespassing, burglary, and theft, Gentry, who prefers the name Abka Ray Bey, says as a citizen of the Moorish American National Republic, that land is her land. And this man was arrested by police in Fayetteville, North Carolina, for interfering with a stolen car investigation. But his wife claims the arrest was illegal because he is a member of the Moorish nation.
He had diplomatic immunity. Why are y'all doing this?
Moors trace their beliefs to Noble Drew Ali, who founded the Moorish Science Temple in Chicago in 1925. With tens of thousands of followers, the faith borrows heavily from Islam. It also teaches that all black Americans are Moorish Americans, descendants of an ancient Moroccan global empire, an idea some followers have taken one step further.
So you don't have to get a license plate or a driver's license. You can lay claim to property.
Spencer Dew, who studies the movement, says Moorish Americans have long taken pride in being American citizens, but as the group splintered over the decades, some offshoots abandoned that view.
But I also think we have some opportunistic individuals, some sort of lone wolf element.
Okay, so you've seen the video. Very interesting, right? So I have a few notes. I have some books. I have a lot of information. So I'm going to try to get through this as quick as possible. So, as you see, these Moorish nationals are laying claim to property, stating that their ancestors were here first. Now, I'm not denying that some of our ancestors were here first. Some of our ancestors, but that's no valid legal reason or legal claim to squat inside of a publicly owned house or a bank-owned house or a house, owned by. I'm going to tell the absolute truth today. The truth. I'm going to keep everything in its context as much as possible, as much as I can, according to my ability and my understanding. So if something is out of context, I'm sincere. It's not that I'm doing it on purpose. So I'm going to try to keep everything within this context, right? So the legal term for laying claim to a property that you don't own is called adverse possession. So adverse possession is another means of involuntary transfer. An owner may lose title to another person who has some claim to the land, takes possession, and most important, uses the land. In New Jersey, a person may acquire title by adverse possession through the continuous, open, notorious, hostile, and exclusive occupation of another person's property for 20 years. So you have to do this. You have to continuously use the property and occupy the property for 20 years. This is the law in New Jersey. You have to follow it. After that time, the user may perfect the claim of title to land through adverse possession by bringing a court suit to quiet title. Through a process known as tacking, continuous periods of adverse possession may be combined by successive users, thus enabling a person who had not been in possession for the entire 20 years to establish a claim of adverse possession. So this means that if I lay claim, if I occupy, use a property, abandoned property, let's get that right, an abandoned property for 10 years, and then my partner come and occupy for another 10 years, that's still valid. We can take control over the property if we do it for those 20 years together. The process is not automatic. Legal action is necessary to perfect the claim. So you can't just use the house or build up the house and have the house for 20 years. You have to use legal claim, or else it's not valid. Adverse possession is not possible against publicly owned property. So you can't do it against, like if the city owns the property, etc. You can't do it. If you do it, they're going to come out against you because it's illegal. You have to follow the law. If you want to do this, you have to do it according to the law that's set for each state. So find out what it is in your state and follow the law if you're going to do this. And another thing, if you're going to do this with a $6 million, $3 million foreclosed home, you know they're going to come after you. It's not going to work. The property has to actually be abandoned. Once an adverse user has established title, the former owner has no recourse. So once you do this correctly, the owner, he loses out. To prevent such a loss of title, each person having a right or title to...
He then has to run for his life, and he leaves the land behind. I mean, he can't sell it, and so he's gone. You have a whole series of sales of the same piece of land. When you look at the public record, what you find is that when it's sold again, the lawyer that's handling that sale is Phil Bettis. He then goes on to become the head of the biracial commission representing Forsyth County. This is a deed. A fellow named Morgan Strickland bought a piece of property, and Morgan Strickland was black, and he left along with everybody else. This was of particular interest because when the Hesters bought a lot on lot 1012, you were the title attorney. Mm-hmm. And following it all the way back is this, which basically says the previous guy owned it by adverse possession, which is to say there never was a sale from Strickland to anyone. And this is not the only one. I found half the black-owned land apparently was never sold. Is this sort of an open secret in your community?
No. When I'm researching title back 50 years, I don't go back to 1912. That's not on my radar screen to research a title in 2005.
I'm talking about 1984, when the Hesters bought their land.
Right, I am too.
And you did the title search. You went back 50 years. That would have taken in all of these transactions, every one of them. And these transactions, the one from Teams to Terry, is clearly phony.
Phony is a harsh word for that. You're really, I'm looking at a sworn affidavit that says that title is acceptable. That's acceptable by title standards in Georgia. I think it's phony to say that I claim title to that property if I've ignored my rights for almost a century. Somebody slept on their rights for almost 100 years, and we're still dealing with an issue. When do we complete that cycle?
Now, the descendants of Morgan Strickland, of his family, what do you say to them?
When I've lost something, particularly my farm or my land, if I feel that's unjust, what invigorates me any more than to go protect that? Federal courts were wide open at that time. They were very present to do that.
You don't feel that there's any, if not legal, moral obligation on the part of this community to make this right?
I feel compassion to the point of, should our community say this is something we should address? You know, it's a difficult question. I mean, I feel that sorriness for them. I feel that compassion, but, you know, it's been a long time. Let me ask you a question. What if your grandfather grew up here? Do you owe reparations because he grew up here? Because of a regional presence, do you think that you're responsible for reparations? Do you think taxpayers should pay?
Your report echoes exactly that sentiment, that the black community is not due reparations for land that was lost during this racial cleansing.
Cleansing is an incredibly offensive word.
What happened here, and the historical record is extremely clear, is that a person of color in this community, they were ordered to leave. And they weren't ordered to leave because they had done anything wrong. They were ordered to leave because they were black. That is a racial cleansing.
All right, man. So, hope you can see with that, man, how adverse possession was used to take the land. You know what I'm saying? How they not even with sharecropping, they just ran a lot of our ancestors up off their land and then went on it to possess it. You know what I'm saying? Which is crazy. But as you can see, that they adverse possessed the land, which means they didn't pay for it. The only way they pay for it or paid for it was by dressing and keeping. Right? Remember in Leviticus 25, the land shall not be sold forever, for the land is mine, and ye are strangers and sojourners with me. Right? And remember the green belts of the Levites, right? The fields of the suburbs of their cities may not be sold, for it is their perpetual possession, right? So the land wasn't bought from you. You know, it was only adverse possessed, right? Somebody came and you know, adverse possessed the land, and they dressed it and kept it, and that's how they obtained, right, the title, right? But like I say, these fields were not to be sold because they were your perpetual possession. So the Most High only had these people dressing and keeping your land because they were not the, you know what I'm saying, the true landowners. You know what I'm saying? They were only keeping it for a fixed amount of time, right? Of payment, rent to farm, right? They were only leasing it. Alright, so you know, and then as you see, you know, you got the Moors out there adverse possessing land, you know what I'm saying, and you know, people just going about things, you know, all kind of ways, and you know, that's really not what people need to be doing. And I'm not telling anybody to go out there and adverse possess anything. Use your brain. You know what I'm saying? Like I say, presentation is not avocation, but listen, take in the word, you know what I'm saying, and decipher it, and then enact whatever your spirit tells you to enact. You feel what I'm saying? But just first understand what's being presented, right? So now the right way, or you know what I'm saying, what I feel like a lot of us should do is trace our ancestry back and see what our ancestors owned, if they did own property, because when, you know, it's interesting, I feel like it was divine, you know, that the day I watched that video by King Drain, you know what I'm saying, the day I watched the video and learned about adverse possession was the same day I found out that my grandfather owned a farm, right, in Tennessee. You know what I'm saying? So I found out that he owned the farm, and the crazy thing about it is he didn't sharecrop. He had a home farm, meaning that the land was not worked by a tenant, but an employee, and the revenue was for the estate, the home of the estate. You feel what I'm saying? It's a home farm. Look up what a home farm is. So what I'm trying to figure out is, you know, he moved down into Florida. They came down into Florida from Tennessee. So I'm trying to figure out what's up with the farm. You feel what I'm saying? What happened to the farm? Yeah, where my people land, you know what I'm saying? What happened? Did he sell the land? Did somebody run him off it and adverse possess it? What's going on with the land? Is it still there? You know, I don't know. That's something I got to look into, you know, but hey, I just, you know what I'm saying, encourage the tribe, man, to, like I said in the last video, trace your ancestry, see what your people had, you know what I'm saying, if they owned any land, understand that's your ancestral heritage, you feel what I'm saying, and if it was not bought from them, then, you know what I'm saying, you need to look into that. So, you know, when you think about that, man, you know, back, you know, to the original point of, you know, Levites don't really buy land. They don't really purchase land because they have a perpetual possession dealing with lands and farms and green belts. You feel what I'm saying? The Levites are joined to the Creator, so it's their duty to keep the way of the Most High. So by any means necessary, they need to keep the way of the Most High and fulfill the duty of man, right? And repossess their possessions. You feel what I'm saying? But as we can see, what these Levites were doing, they were going into the uncultivated place, right? These righteous ones, they were going into the uncultivated and abandoned land, laying claim on it by dressing it and keeping the ways of the Most High, right? And providing an organic and natural environment for the Most High to commune. Alright, man, so what I want to do right now, I want to come back to the Bro King Drain, right? I don't know what the Bro King Drain was on, but I feel the Most High must have had him, you know, laying some stuff out, man, because bro was on point with a lot of stuff, man, and a lot of people ain't catch it, you know what I'm saying? And, you know, but you know, people, you know, they, you know, some other stuff that ain't got nothing to do with nothing, so you know how that go. But But then he got this video right here, right? Carolina Indians, part 2, Land of Eden. Alright, so I want to get into this because we talking about cultivating the uncultivated land, the deserted land, right? We talking about cherubs and cherub and cherub, the land becoming desolated, it becoming the opposite of a garden, right? But so when we talking about the South, when we talking about sharecropping and we talk about the recultivation of our land, what I want to do is I want to look at what the land was like before the adverse possessors and the colonizers came and took it. You know what I'm saying? So right here, the bro got the video, right? Carolina Indians Part 2, Land of Eden, right? Remember, we've been digging on the South. Last video we was pretty much digging in the South on that video. So what I want to do, man, is want to get some information on what the South looked like before the colonizers came. Alright, so I asked y'all to rock with me. We're gonna get a little bit of this. Know this video getting long already, but you know.
The Cherokee Garden of Eden. Okay. I said I remember I was in the library before in my local library here in North Carolina, and I remember seeing something about, you know, it was I don't remember the name of the book. I have to go back, but it said something about headed to or journey to the Garden of Eden, something like that. So we've been just looking at some things, man. And well, they said the Garden of Eden, and they were talking about nothing but the Cherokees, how the Cherokees were living in the Carolinas. So we've been doing a little digging. All right. We're going to read from, and I have to find that book, man. I'm going to find it. But, you know, we found some other things. No problem. So, Colonial Search for a Southern Eden. We're reading from Google Books. It will be on the link. The notion that the early paradise, similar to it, if not the veritable site of the scriptural Eden, might be found in some southern regions of the New World, was widely held in the 17th and 18th centuries. Explorers from Virginia expected to find the Great South Sea somewhere to the southwest, and they believed its shores would be a land like Eden. Okay? Milk and honey, gold and silver. In the summer of 1650, okay, Edward Bland, an English merchant resident in Virginia, and Abraham Wood, a militia captain and Indian trader, led an expedition from site of St. Petersburg to a point in southwest Virginia where they discovered a river which they believed ran west into the South Sea. Okay, into the South Sea. I don't like this. Let me change this music. Okay. That next year, Bland printed in London the discovery of New Britain, which carried a preface entitling the land and urging all who desired the advancement of Hawa, or God's glory, by the conversion of the Indians and the augmentation of the English Commonwealth in extending its liberties, to consider the present benefit and future profits of settling the new territory lying between 35 and 37 degrees north latitude. This geographical position carried a mystical significance. Bland's book reprinted a passage attributed to Sir Walter Raleigh, Marrow of History. So we got to look into that book. We got to try to find that one. Pointing out that God had placed Eden on the 35th parallel of north latitude. This location guaranteed an ideal climate of perpetual spring and summer, a garden shaded by palm trees described by Raleigh as the great blessing and wonder of nature. Other earthly paradises, the passage implied, would be found along the 35th parallel, presumably also shaded by palm trees and producing dates, raisins, spices, and everything else which Adam had for his comfort. This location would put paradise along a line connecting New Bern and Fayetteville, North Carolina, with Chattanooga and Memphis, Tennessee. Okay, so named it Euphrates. So they named, the names that they knew, right? So when Lieutenant Governor Alexander Spotswood of Virginia in 1776 led an exploring expedition across the Blue Ridge Mountain, he discovered a river which was now called the Shenandoah, but which Spotswood and his company named the Euphrates, after one of the 4 rivers of Eden, because the country looked to them like paradise. The explanation of why this spot appeared so rosy at that time may be found, however, in an account of the expedition, which must have been one of the most convivial on record. On the very crest of the ridge, the explorers stopped to drink the health of King Georgia. Okay? And the opportunity seemed appropriate to celebrate still further. Okay, so we had dinner. Okay. They had champagne. Great. So William Byrd. Okay, we got some William Byrd. So let's see. Hold on. Let's go back because they're talking about milk and honey. Milk and honey. So Eden and Utopia south of Virginia. So we drank the governor's health. So I'm on page 43. We drank the governor's health and fired another volley. We had several sorts of liquor, viz., Virginia red wine, white wine, Irish Uskay Berg, brandy, shrubs, 2 sorts of rum, champagne, Connery, cherry punch, water. They had all this stuff. After these portions, the driest riverbed in Arizona, much less the Valley of Virginia, would have seen a land flowing with milk and honey. So now they're talking about Arizona. All right. And Virginia. All that. When William Byrd II of Westover, Virginia, set out to promote the sale of a large tract of land which he had acquired on the Dan River, here, the Carolinas, near the border between North Carolina and Virginia, he called his property the Land of Eden and supplied notes to a German-Swiss land agent named Jenner, who published it in Switzerland in 1737, an alluring promotional tract under the title of Newfound Eden. Okay? The Promised Land. We're talking about Eden. They didn't have anything. They was broke. You know, Africa was whooping their ass too. They was getting it from all over. And they say Columbus was one of the last ones to come over. Alright. So this is William Byrd. We got a little bit of William Byrd. This is William Byrd II. So we're going to get into him. But let's read the description of Byrd's property. So Byrd came over and, you know, did what he had to do. Okay. But all this stuff that, you know, this property and stuff that they claiming, it was granted to them, so-called granted to them by their kings from their land. So they really have no jurisdiction because they're running on laws from land in Europe. And try to say that you people have no rights to it. Us. The copper color. Native, Indian, autochthon, indigenous, whatever you want to call. Let's go. Alright, the description of Byrd's property was intended to leave no doubt in the reader's mind that he indeed was the earthly paradise. Because promoters had lately been recommending South Carolina and Georgia to hopeful Swiss immigrants. Alright, notice how they're spelling immigrants too. That's key. Look that up in etymology. Okay? The exact reverse is Byrd's land of Eden. There the climate is perfect, the air is pure, the water is as sweet as milk, and the sun shines every day of the year. When it rains gently at night, sufficient to keep the heavenly place well watered. In this mild and benefit land, disease is at night, sufficient to keep the heavenly place well watered. At night, sufficient to keep the heavenly place well watered. At night, sufficient to keep the heavenly place well watered. In this mild and benefit land, disease is particularly unknown, and Europeans who come aligning soon find themselves restored to health. And what is much more miraculous, the old people receive quite new strength. Excuse me. Wow. In the mild and benefit land, disease is particularly unknown, and Europeans who come allying soon find themselves restored to health. And what is much more miraculous, the old people receive quite new strength, feel as if they were wholly born anew. That is much stronger, much more light-footed, and in every way much more comfortable than before. The products of this Eden, we will not be surprised to learn, are particularly all those which a shelter or the British Board of Trade might desire. At last, in the Dan River bottoms, I got excited. Alright. The products of this Eden will not be surprised to learn. We will not be surprised to learn are particularly all those which a settler or the British Board of trade might desire. At last, in the Dan River bottoms, the bottom, okay, the Dan River bottoms, you see it, the bottom of the river, if one believes this tract, the production of silk and wine is assured, along with other good things. Excuse me. Alright. So one could make silk easily. The author asserts, because the land is full of mulberry trees and require little exertion. People have already tried this and obtained very beautiful silk. The English, however, did not want to go to any trouble in this. Cotton grows insufficiently in this land. One can merely pick it and spin it and make all kinds of materials for its use. It is also a very good ware in trade. So that's why they didn't want to give up the so-called slavery. That's why they didn't want to give up the slavery. Because they didn't want to do it. Flax, hemp, indigo, grains, fruits, and herbs of all description flourish. Right here. Grapes grow in great abundance and have already proved their utility, and therefore nothing is lacking but good, great people. Especially valuable is the sugar maple tree. This is the most useful tree in the whole world because one makes wine, spirits, vinegar, honey, and sugar from it, which comes from its juice, from the ground, from the tree. Verily, nothing was lacking in Eden but a happy people to consume its products. Unfortunately, the ship loaded with the Swiss immigrants. To this day, the land is reasonably fertile, but its products have already been such prosaic things as corn, cotton, and tobacco. Yeah, they got tobacco fields out here, man. You know, hopefully we can get some pictures of this land, man. But, you know, these lands in the mountains out here, man, with this water flowing, man. Whew. Beautiful. Beautiful. Notwithstanding William Byrd's low opinion of South Carolina as indicated in New Found Eden. Okay, now, understand too, Carolina, they called South Carolina Carolina at one point. They called North Carolina the Carolinas. They called Georgia, Virginia, Carolina. I think even Tennessee, Carolina, and even further. They was colonizing. They tried to say that Carolina, South Carolina, North Carolina was one of the first to be colonized. Nobody. No. They was one of the last. They was colonizing all the cities around the Carolinas that they were calling Carolinas. Oh, we gonna get to it. Alright. Alright. So notwithstanding William Byrd's low opinion of South Carolina as indicated in the New Found Eden, and an equally low opinion of North Carolina, which he had expressed in the history of the dividing line. So we're going to get into a little bit of that too. So this is William Byrd. The Carolinas proved highly profitable. So you know, we'll get to it. The Carolinas proved highly profitable to the empire and won the approval of the merchants, bankers, and politicians. Highly profitable to the empire and won the approval of the merchants. Profitable to the empire and won the approval of the merchants. The Carolinas proved highly profitable to the empire and won the approval of the merchants, bankers, and politicians in London. Okay. Along their products were not precisely the ones which the mercantilists had originally intended. They fulfilled perfectly the current idea of the proper relation between colony and the mother country. So even that irrecitable and hard to please agent of the crown, Edward Randolph, Surveyor General of His Majesty's Customs of North America, had only words of praise in a report which he made to the Board of Trade in London on March 16, 1699. The great improvement made in this province is wholly owing to the industry and labor of the inhabitants, he wrote. They have applied themselves to make such commodities as much increase the revenue of the crown, okay, as cotton, wool, ginger, indigo, etc., but finding them not to answer the end. They are set apart. They are set upon much pitch, tar, and turpentine, and the plant of rice, and can send over great quantities yearly if they had encouragement from England. Okay, so they. All right. The caravans often bought long strips of Indian captives to be sold as slaves to Barbados and other islands of the West Indies. All right. The caravans often bought long strips of Indian captives to be sold as slaves to Barbados and other islands of the West Indies. All right. The caravans often bought long strips of Indian captives to be sold as slaves to Barbados and other islands of the West Indies. We must also remember this dark chapter in the history of commerce. Charleston was most important. Charleston was an important slavery port. All right. So again, they had, well, on this part of the land, the Carolinas, you know, they had all the, you know, the cotton. They had all the, you know, all the rice, the grains, you know, and so they took the land from the captured Indians, okay, and then made them work, and so they can, you know, export, you know, those things to, you know, England. All right, because the Spanish and the French, so they were, you know, they were all fighting each other over this land. They were fighting the English, Britain, for this land. All right, so they were colonizing other parts, but they couldn't. This is one of the last part that they took because of autochthonous people wasn't giving this up. All right. So then they captured the Indians and then they made them work on the land. Prisoners of war, POWs, slaves. All right, so that's why they didn't want to give up slavery, because they didn't want to do it, because it was so much and they just didn't want to do it. That's the English. That's the Englishmen. All right. So captured Indians made by the hundreds were sold to ship captains headed for the West Indies, and Negroes by the thousands were brought into Charleston from Africa. Do you see the separation? So they were shipping the autochthonous people, the people from the land here, and bringing in Africans, which they called at that time Negroes. Indian slaves were not dependable in the Carolinas, for they might escape to the forest and make their way back to their tribes. But African Negroes had no such. Alright, so I'm going to be reading from that. It's called The Winter Falls. Natulaha Natural Forest, North Carolina. So Winter Falls, so this Lake Chickasaw. Winter Falls, I'm sorry, it's really small on my phone. White Water Falls, Natalaha, so that's Natahala, National Forest, North Carolina. Alright, so to experience a place fully, something must learn something of its past. The human impact that particular something field of water that is Lake Chickasaw conceals evidence. It also suppresses, but I remember enough South Carolina history to see Indians in the clear, something below. When I say something, it's cut off. I can't really read it. Okay. These river valleys were the Cherokee. These river valleys were the Cherokee. The site of their low, but long before the emergence of something alley distant tribe of that name. Just stay with me, people. People living here at the front of the wall before, while there is no evidence hunter stalking mammoths in the archaeologists have established the Arctic tribesmen, hunter, gatherer, were making pottery and killing something spear throwing at the same time that Abraham was driving his herds, also Jordan River. The Arctic tradition to the woodland across the time David 1000 BC and the wood, the Mississippian in the 8th century, not until the 18th century would peoples living here have been recognized as Cherokee.
Alright, yeah, man, so we back. I hope you guys enjoyed that, but as you can see, man, a lot of information pertaining to the South, man, and how this South was like a garden, right? The South was like the Garden of Eden, right? Now, remember I told you to pay attention or to call into mind my last or the video before my last, right? The Flaming Sword of Eden. Remember how we was talking about the merchants, right? All the merchants coming into the land of Eden and trafficking all the goods out, right? You know what I'm saying? You can see some of that in the video I just played right now. But understand something, right? Because we look at this map right here. We're looking at the South. And we see at this map in the 1700s, the whole South was called Florida, right? And you understand, like, the most ancient, well, the first established cities is right here in modern day Florida, St. Augustine and Jacksonville, right? Like the nation, St. Augustine is the nation's oldest city, right? So they came in through Florida, right? They came in through the Carolinas, through Virginia, right? So it's literally like they came into a garden. You feel what I'm saying? And so the garden was very fruitful. It was very fertile. You know what I'm saying? It was like the Garden of Eden, or it was the Garden of Eden. You know what I'm saying? But it had all these delicacies, man. That's why that's one of the reasons what the Civil War was about, because the South had it made. They were living lavish, and the North was like, well, shoot, man, we want some of that too, and if you don't want to give up that, then we finna have to make it. You know what I'm saying? So you had that whole situation right there, but even as you can see, like in the South, right? Look at all the rivers in the South, right? So you know what I'm saying? They was growing and harvesting and mining all kind of minerals and stones and silk, wine, right? Remember the Bible even said they sold a wine. They sold a girl for wine, right? You know what I'm saying? And that was done right here in the South, man. They had so much wine, right? They were selling for wine, right? They was using wine as a part of commerce, you know what I'm saying? So, and they had a lot of rivers to do it, right? You can come up through the Mississippi over into Tennessee and Ohio, you know what I'm saying? All these other rivers, right? And even 4 particular rivers that they try to even connect to the Garden of Eden, which was the Chattooga and the Horse Pasture River, or something like that, you know what I'm saying? But one thing you must understand is even Florida, right? If all this land was called Florida, we must understand why. We know when the Spaniards came into modern day Florida, it was a land full of flowers, so they named the land Florida. So if the whole South was called Florida, then we know this was a flourishing place, right? This was a flowery garden-like place, right? Let's get some a little bit of information on that. Right. No. Just a little bit on that, right? Skim through that. Alright, Florida's western boundary came into slightly sharper focus on the French, began establishing themselves in the Mississippi Valley. Alright, they claimed the entire Mississippi Valley from France. Right, this conflicted with Spain's claim on the Gulf South region. Alright, so get a little bit of that, So as you can see, the whole South was called Florida, right? Right, when Florida touched the Mississippi. Alright, so we'll go into the etymology, right? Go into the etymology on Florida. Florida, U.S. state, formerly a Spanish colony, literally flowering, right? Easter, right? The pencil was discovered on that day, March 20, the expedition by Spanish Florida Ponce de Leon, right? And Florida's flowery, in bloom, see florid, right? So Florida means flowery, in bloom, right? Alright, so florid means strikingly beautiful, right? From French floride, fleurie, flourishing, right? Flowery, in bloom, flower, thrive, bloom, sense of ruddy. Now, where does that have anything to do? You know what I'm saying? Where that come from? Right, ruddy. You know what I'm saying? I don't understand where that come from. What it got to do with anything, but if we talking about garden, right? We talking about flower, garden. We talking about Adam, the farmer in the garden, right? We know Adam is ruddy. His name means, ruddy. One of the meanings of his name, right? The mahogany complexion. So it does, I guess it is relevant, right? Meaning highly decorated, profusely adorned as with flowers, right? A place that is dressed, right? That is dressed and cultivated, man. It's highly decorated, profusely adorned with flowers. So if you can see, the whole South, right, was called, a flowery place, a place in bloom. This was a blossoming place. It was a garden. It was like the Garden of Eden. You come over here, look at some maps of farmland, right? Farmland map, right? You can see a lot of farmland in the southern region, you know what I'm saying? In the south and things like that. Alright, now like I say, man, call to mind the Flaming Sword video when we were talking about the trafficking. All the trafficking and dimension of merchants that the Bible have when you're dealing with, right, the spoiling of the land, right? Tyre, right, which was Lebanon, and we talking about merchants, you know what I'm saying? People from the sea coming and trading, right, in the land, right, taking the resources and shipping them, you know what I'm saying? Let's see if we can get right. They have made all their ships of the boards of the trees, fir trees of Shinar. They have taken cedars from Lebanon as masts, right, for these ships that they can transport and traffic all your goods, right? Tarshish was thy merchant, right? Javan, Tubal was thy merchant. Syria was thy merchant, you know what I'm saying? Damascus was thy merchant in the multitudes of wares of the making for the riches of wine and wool, right? Make you think of the wine, the grapes, and the cotton as was in the south, right? The well-watered land. You feel what I'm saying? So just take all that in mind as we come over here to Ezekiel chapter 28, right? And we talk, like I said, we were talking about the land, the merchants, and how they were coming and taking all the merchandise, right, out of this fruitful land. So when you look at chapter 28, verse 13, check it out. He said, "Thou hast been in Eden, right, the garden of God. Every precious stone was thy covering, the sardis, topaz, and diamond, the beryl, and the onyx, the jasper, the sapphire, the emerald, the carbuncle, and gold. And the workmanship of thy tabrets and of thy pipes was prepared in thee in the day that thou wast created," right? Now check this out. He say, "Thou art the anointed cherub that covereth. I have set thee so. Thou was upon the holy mountain of God, and thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire." All right, so understand that we're talking about the Son of Man take up a lamentation upon King of Tyrus, right, which is the king of Lebanon, of Tyre, right, and tell him that he has been in Eden. So this king ruling in Lebanon, which is associated with the Garden of God, right? We know there was cedars in the Garden of God in Lebanon. So this king of who's ever ruling in this territory is telling him that thou hast been in Eden in the garden of God, right, and has reaped the benefits of all the precious things thereof. Now look what the Most High called him. He say, "Thou art the anointed cherub that covereth." Why would he call him that, right? Why would he call him that? Because down here he say, "By the multitude of thy merchants they have filled the midst of thee with violence, and thou hast sinned," right? Now remember we was getting Revelations, I think it was 18. It was talking about the merchants, right? How there will be no merchandise being shipped once Babylon has fallen, right? We know this was talking about a miracle, so just put it into perspective, right? What they saying. So even when they call him an anointed cherub, what did the cherub do? The cherub of the garden of God was to have a cherub, or excuse me, a cherub. The cherub was to have the cherub that made the land cherub or cherub, right? Meaning dry, desolate, you know what I'm saying, the wilderness. So he's saying that you went in Eden, reaped the benefits, and you was the anointed cherub with the cherub that made the land cherub, right? A desolate wilderness, because you reaped and you sucked it dry of all its precious things, all its minerals, its gold, its diamonds, its jewels, its cotton, its wine, its grapes, its vineyards, its rivers, you know what I'm saying? You literally turned the land into a desolate place, a place not as fertile as it once was. All right, so with all that, man, put in perspective, I know the video getting long, about to close it out. You know what I'm saying? Understand that your land, right, the land of your ancestors, as well as the ones of this priesthood, right, was a very fertile land. It was like the Garden of Eden, right? Possibly could have been the location, as some say. You know, we don't know. But one thing about it, we do know that the South is a Shemitic inheritance, because when you look at the land of America, you got to understand the lands that we would have possessed would have been the Shemitic regions, right? The regions not too hot, not too cold, where all four seasons come into play, right? Which really you only find that in the South when you look at North America, right? You only find that mild, that perpetual spring, summer kind of in the south, like in Florida, right? Because, you know what I'm saying, Florida is limited to the modern day Florida now, and you see the tropical environment is kind of retracted itself to that part as well. But we know the whole South was like a garden and tropical and flourishing, you know what I'm saying? So it was definitely a Shemitic inheritance, you know what I'm saying? It fit that description, like we say, man. It was a garden at one point in time. It was being dressed and kept by those who was keeping the ways of the Heavenly Father, right? As well as housing some of those who probably weren't keeping those traditions, but you know how that goes. So like I say, man, your land was once a garden, right? And now this anointed cherub has came in and made it cherub, right? He's made it not as fertile as it used to be, right? But we can see, right, there's prophecies, and there's a need for the righteous to come and rise up and occupy these uncultivated regions so they can fulfill the duty of man and dress and keep and become planet keepers again, right? So I want to come over here to something, you know, this formal gardening that I was put on to by the bro J Stu. Much love to the brother, you know what I'm saying? It's called permaculture, right? And so permaculture is the development of agricultural ecological systems intended to be sustainable and self-sufficient, right? So we talking about developing gardens that become self-sufficient over time. And so what I did, man, I dig into a lot of permaculture, man. I've been digging into a lot, man. It's a great way to farm. A lot of them are doing what you call back to Eden farm, right? Which is they're not necessarily tilling or working up the soil. They're going into nature and seeing how nature carries itself, and they're mimicking that in this garden, right? They're finding out that in nature and in the wilderness, you don't really find uncovered soil, right? And so that soil, the covering, the leaves, the chips, the things like that fall on the ground is what actually provide nutrients to the soil, make it nutrient rich, right? So a lot of these farmers have got a lot of wood chips and shavings and, you know what I'm saying, fallen branches, leaves, and chopped them up and made like a mulch and spread that over their soil. And over time, man, the soil becomes self-sustainable, like it feeds itself, and it's very nutrient efficient. And what they do is they take care of the crop, right? Just like a child, right? You raise a child, you dress him and keep him until he can take care of himself, and then he bears his own fruit. It's the same way with the garden, right? You dress and keep the plants until they can take care of themselves, and then they become self-sufficient. Right now, the plants are dropping their own leaves and covering for the soil, right? And they're dropping fruit, and they're producing every year. So it's really a self-sustaining ecosystem. So I've been watching some videos, man, about permaculture. And what you find, a lot of permaculture, they don't really try to, well, some of them don't try to modernize or try to keep the gardens like in the typical manner you may see, like farmland. They really keep. A lot of them do what you call, they grow these food forests, right? And like this video right here, man, thriving 23-year-old permaculture food forest and invitation to wildness. So these particular permaculture farmers have left their garden like, wow, they created a food forest where it's all food, it's all lush vegetation. They have turn land into lush vegetation, and it's producing straight food, but it got that wild look to it. It's like a forest. It's like you're walking through a food forest, a forest where you can just pick food and eat, right? I mean, that's what we talking about, ain't it? You know what I'm saying? So I was watching this video right here, and what was so interesting to me was the first thing the man said when the video came on, and it kind of blew my mind because it was so relevant to
my philosophy about what to do in the world isn't go to a pristine area and live there and enjoy your life. It's to find a place that's degraded and fix it up. My philosophy about what to do in the world isn't go to a pristine area and live there and enjoy your life. It's to find a place that's degraded and fix it up. My philosophy about what to do in the world isn't go to a pristine area and live there and enjoy your life. It's to find a place that's degraded and fix it up.
Alright, man, so you heard that, right? Crazy, right? And very relevant, and then it's even crazy that the man would even have that type of philosophy, or the way that he does things, man. That's I feel like, man, that was just crazy, man. It was divinely inspired, because like he said, he's talking about cultivating uncultivated land, dressing and keeping, right? Land that has been degraded, right? Is lost its garden-like appearance, So as you can see right here, man, this is his land, right? His land, look at this, it's like a forest, right? You got all kind of stuff, man, but it wasn't like this originally. It was uncultivated land, right? Flat, uncultivated land. He even shows you, I encourage you guys to check out the video. He even shows you what the land looked like before, but look at it now, right? Look how lush it is, you know what I'm saying? Man, the food forest they grow here is crazy, man. Like this is 23 years, right? Alright, so I'm gonna come over here to this video. Alright, now this right here is lawn to food forest in 5 years natural farming, permaculture gardening. Right, hold on. Alright, so when you go to this guy's channel, you see his video, right? Lawn to food forest in 5 years. You see the lawn before, then you see it after, right? And afterwards, he has this lush, this permaculture garden.
September 10 today, and I'm in my 5-year-old food forest. The system is in high production, and I wish that there was a way that I could convey to you how much food we're getting for how little work we're doing. To the untrained eye, if you looked around, you might think it was messy, but everything in here has a purpose. Everything has a function. I'm going to go through, show you how everything's doing. Let's go.
Alright, so think about that, man. This man is from lawn to food forest in 5 years. So you seen this lawn originally. In 5 years, he has created a self-sustainable garden that produces so much food. It's crazy. You feel what I'm saying? Now think about that, right? 5 years to develop this food forest. Now understand something. If the duty of man is to dress and keep the earth, right? And we talking about the possession of land, right? An ancient inheritance, right? And we look at laws of adverse possession, right? And we see in Florida, the requirement for the adverse possession is that you dress and keep the land, use it, occupied for a span of 7 years, right? And after 7 years, you create a title. So understand that, right? If you know what I'm saying? If the Most High is calling us to enact the duty of man and cultivate these cultivated regions, to turn the earth into a garden again, right? That we may be planet keepers and keep this paradise, keep this earth at a heavenly and divine state. When you go and you adverse possess a piece of property legally, right? If you choose to do this, you feel what I'm saying? And you dress and keep it. Man, if you were to develop one of these permaculture food forests in 5 years, right, or however long it may take you, you would have a self-sustaining gardening mechanism that will produce a lot of food. And by the time it is a self-sustainable mechanism, you would have the title and deed to the land. You feel what I'm saying? Now, who knows if we have that much time? But it would start the process. Remember, you say, prepare ye the way before me, right? So understand, right? It's about laying the foundation while we can. So I feel like it would be a very powerful thing if one could get out, right, and start cultivating the uncultivated places, turning them into food forests, permaculture, right, self-sustainable gardening systems where we can supply natural environments as well as a natural environment for the animals to come, and as well as natural produce and food for the people, right? And by the time the garden is at a self-sustainable place, you know what I'm saying, it's self-sustainable, it's taking care of itself. Now it'll be time for you to pick up the deed to the land and own it. Alright, so going back to Isaiah 29 verse 17, they say what? Is it not yet a very little while, and Lebanon shall be turned into a fruitful field, right? A garden, a fruitful field. But check this out. And the fruitful field shall be esteemed as a forest. So we're talking about a garden producing fruit, right? A fruitful field, and this fruitful field shall be esteemed as a forest. So it sounds a lot like the food forest in the permaculture system, right? So understand, man, if you possess your ancestors' inheritance, right? These Levites, these Levitical ones who are joined to the Creator, or have joined themselves to the Creator, right? They corrected their status and are now honorable at law. Because the last thing you need to be doing is trying to adverse possess some land as a debtor. You feel what I'm saying? That's not the way to go about things. So, you know what I'm saying? In the correct status, these ones who are joined to the Creator and His ways, right? Who don't really come from a custom of purchasing land, but are allotted the land and have an eternal right of possession to the land, right? By keeping the way of the Most High, by dressing and keeping His land, right? Set up these self-sustainable gardens, turn the land into a garden again. That you may produce food for the tribe, right? To heal the tribe, that they may eat right. You feel what I'm saying? You may grow the herbs so you can heal. You know what I'm saying? It's all about the duty of man. What is the duty of man? One can sit here and argue and try to justify the right for one, you know, to do unnatural things such as eat the flesh of animals and things like that. But understand, if we are coming back to the garden, if it's about cultivating land, what animals are you going to be eating? You feel what I'm saying? When you have dominion, when you are doing what you were commanded to do, right? Adam was to obey the voice of the Most High God. What did God say to Adam? I give you every green herb bearing seed, and it shall be for meat, right? So it's about cultivating that land, getting back to living off nature, the natural laws, the way the Essenes were living, and we can help ourselves do that, right? By cultivating the uncultivated land, right? By possessing our possessions, right? Our ancestral heritage. You know what I'm saying? Growing these gardens, getting this natural food system, these self-sustainable systems incorporated into the area so that we can, by the time they are what they are to be, this fruitful field that is accounted as a forest, right? It's forest, by that time, it'll be time, almost time for you to pick up the deed. You feel what I'm saying? And that you would own the land that is literally a garden, is literally a self-sustainable garden, and you own it, and now you can feed and make revenue or however you choose, whatever you choose to do with the produce, man. But that would be a very powerful step in the orchestration of refuge and exodus and separation and purification. All right, man, to close this video out, man, I want to read you guys this Warriors of the Rainbow, right? I want to end with this, and the brother Perus Salem sent this to me, man, and it was very on point, on time as usual, you know. So I just want to read this for you, right? The Warriors of the Rainbow. There was an old lady from the Cree tribe named Eyes of Fire. Now look what they named her, right? Remember for the last video, right? Look what they named her, right? From this native tribe, and I think the tribe is in the south. You know what I'm saying? So, anyways, who prophesied that one day, because of the white man's or your niggas, look what they called the white man. Right? They call him the black man, right? The pale man. Niggas. Yo niggas. Greed, because of the white man's or your niggas' greed. There would come a time when the fish would die in the streams, the bird would fall from the air, and the waters would be blackened, and the trees would no longer be mankind as we would know it, would all cease to exist. There would come a time when the keepers of the legends, stories, cultural rituals, and myths, and all of the ancient tribal customs would be needed to restore us to health. They would be mankind's key to survival. They were the warriors of the rainbow. There would come a day of awakening when all peoples and all tribes from a new world of justice, peace, friendship, and recognition of the Great Spirit. All right, the warriors of the rainbow would spread these messages and teach all people of the earth, or the Elohi. They would teach them how to live, right? That's very Hebraic, don't it? They would teach them how to live, look, the way of the Great Spirit, right? Keep the way of the Lord. They would teach them how to keep the way of the Lord. They would tell them of how the world today has turned away from the Great Spirit and that our earth is sick. The warriors of the rainbow will show the people that this ancient being, the Great Spirit, is full of love and understanding, and teach them how to make the earth, or Elo, beautiful again, right? Teach you how to make it Florida, right? Florida again. Alright, these warriors will give the people principles or rules to follow to make their path right in the world, right? We're talking about a priesthood. You feel what I'm saying? These principles would be those of the ancient tribe. We're talking about an ancient priesthood. The warriors of the rainbow would teach the people of the ancient practice of unity, love, and understanding. They would teach harmony among people in all four corners of the earth. Like the ancient tribes, they would teach the people how to pray to the Great Spirit with love that flows like the beautiful mountain stream and flows along the path of the ocean of life. Once again, they would be able to feel joy in solitude and counsels. They would be free of petty jealousies and love all mankind as their brothers, regardless of color, race, or religion. They would feel happiness. They would feel happiness enter their hearts and become as one with the entire human race. Their hearts would be pure and radiate warmth, understanding, and respect for all mankind, nature, and the Great Spirit. They would once again fill their minds, hearts, souls, and deeds with the purest thoughts. They would seek the beauty of the Master of Life, the Great Spirit. They would find the strength and beauty in prayer and the solitudes of life. Their children would once again be able to run free and enjoy the treasures of nature and Mother Earth, free from the fears of toxins and destruction, right? GMO and all those things, right? Wrought by the Yonegi and his practices of greed. The river would again run clear. The forests would be abundant and beautiful. The animals and the birds would be replenished, right? Because there's more places for them to inhabit that garden-like. The powers of the plants and animals would again be respected, and conservation of all that is beautiful would become the way of life, or a way of life. The poor, sick, and needy would be cared for by their brothers and sisters of the earth. The practice would again become part of their daily lives. The leaders of the people would be chosen in the old way, not by their political party, nor who could speak the loudest, boast the most, or by name calling or mudslinging, but by those actions that spoke the loudest, those who demonstrate their love, wisdom, courage, and those who showed that they could and did the work for the good of all would be chosen as the leaders of chief. They would be chosen by their quality and not the amount of money they obtain. Like the thoughtful and devoted ancient chiefs, they would understand the people with love and see the way, and see their young were educated in love and wisdom of their surroundings, right? Were educated with the love and wisdom of their surroundings. They would show them the miracles, that miracles can be accomplished to heal the world of its ills and restore it to health and beauty. These tasks of the warriors of the rainbow are many and great. There will be terrifying mountains of ignorance to conquer, and they shall find prejudice and hatred. They must be dedicated, unwavering in their strength, and strong of heart. They will find willing hearts, and minds will follow them on this road of returning Mother Earth to beauty and plenty once more. The day will come. It is not far away. The day we shall see how we owe our very existence to the people of all tribes that have maintained their culture and heritage, those that have kept the rituals, stories, legends, and myths alive. It will be with this knowledge, the knowledge that they have preserved, that we shall once again return to harmony with nature and Mother Earth and mankind. It will be with this knowledge that we shall find the key to our survival. This is the story of the warriors of Rainbow, and this is my reason for protecting the culture, heritage, and knowledge of my ancestors. I know that the days the eyes of fire spoke of will come. I want my children and grandchildren to be prepared to accept this task, the task of being one of the warriors of the rainbow, right? So this lady named Eyes of Fire spoke this prophecy about these ancient ones coming and living by the ancient ways and teaching the world the ancient ways, so that they could store the earth, right, back to its beauty and its plenty, right, and things of that nature, man. So all right, fam, so I just want to leave you with that right there, man. I know it's a lot, you know, but if you can get it, I definitely appreciate it, you know what I'm saying. the duty of man, right? We must cultivate the uncultivated places, turn the earth into a garden again, right? Start dressing and keeping the planet we was given to dress and keep. You feel what I'm saying? And that we may be in an environment that would teach us the ways of our Creator, teach us what it is to be like the Creator, right? To dress and keep the seed of life, right? Just as He did for us, man. So, like I say, man, dig into your ancestry, right? Proclaim your rights, your liberty, right? Correct your status and go back and possess your ancestral heritage, right? Because, I mean, as black, I'm not sure what ancestral heritage you come from. Neither does the legal system. You know what I'm saying? So, trace your heritage, man. Find your ancestral possession and go and repossess it, right? And turn the earth into a garden. Cultivate it, right? That we may keep the way of the Lord and understand and create this highway, this paradise, this place of divine communion, right? Where the Spirit of the Lord is present, right? It's very organic. It's highly carbonated, just as we are. You know what I'm saying? So, like I say, I want to leave you guys with that, man. To them Levitical ones, to the priesthood, go and reestablish the priesthood, right? The Horeb cities, your Levitical cities, right? That are dry and desolate and uncultivated. Go and cultivate them so that you can provide refuge. You feel what I'm saying? So that you can feed the nation. You can nourish the nation. Remember, the woman had wings of an eagle that she might fly into the wilderness, the uncultivated land where she is nourished, where she is fed for a certain time, right? So I encourage all of you, man, to remember the duty of man and return to being planet keepers so that we may turn our home right into the paradise that it once was. Shalom.